From Studio 401, it's the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on The Fringe FM. I'm Vance Nesbitt, and here's our headlines. Catholic man has been nailed to a cross every Good Friday for the past 33 years. A Filipino Catholic man playing the role of Jesus Christ in a yearly Good Friday reenactment of his crucifixion has been nailed to a wooden cross for the 33rd consecutive time this past Good Friday. A 58-year-old man in San Fernando City has been volunteering to get nailed to a cross on Good Friday since the 1980s, but recently announced that next year will be his last impersonating Jesus Christ. He is currently looking for a successor, willing to have 4-inch nails driven into his hands and feet and get lifted up on a large wooden cross for about 5 minutes. He also wants that person to be humble and not brag about that special role. And a man cuts off his own finger after accidentally voting for the wrong candidate in a national election. Pawan Kumar, a 25-year-old Indian man from Uttar Pradesh, chopped off his index finger with a meat cleaver in desperation after accidentally voting for the wrong candidate in India's national election. Kumar became an overnight sensation, first in India and then globally, thanks to a viral video of him with a bandaged index finger he reportedly cut off as self-punishment for voting for the wrong candidate. Source, Oddity Central. And a 10-year court battle of a woman who was fined for not holding an escalator handrail. When riding an escalator, it is recommended that you keep a tight grip on the handrail, well, just to be safe. But what if you choose to disregard that advice? Well, one Canadian woman has been fighting a 10-year-long court battle for her right to ride the escalators hands-free. And let's go on a fun fact blitz, and let's see how many you remember by the end of the day. The world's youngest parents were age 8 and 9. They lived in China, and they had their child in 1910. In the 16th and 17th century in the country of Turkey, anyone caught drinking coffee was put to death. Abraham Lincoln's dog was also assassinated. In England, the Speaker of the House is not allowed to speak. About 3,000 years ago, most Egyptians died by the time that they were 30. It's also known that the first contraceptive was crocodile dung, and it was used by the Egyptians in 2000 BC. The youngest pope was 11 years old. And Richard Versailles, a tenor performing at New York's Metropolitan Opera House, suffered a heart attack and fell off a 10-foot ladder to the stage just after singing the line, "You can only live so long." Thanks for listening to the Stranger Than Fiction News right here on the Fringe FM. Again, I'm Vance Nesbitt, news anchor and sorcerer.
Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS speed rescue.
Contact, nice, in orbit. The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
Broadcasting from atop a hill in the mossy creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas, this is Lighting the Void, and I'm your host, Joe Roop. Thank you for joining us tonight. It is a beautiful night here in the natural state, and I'm glad you're with us tonight on the broadcast. It is Thursday, May the 16th. We're going to go on into the 17th, and tonight we're going to be speaking to Corinne Boyer. We're going to be discussing plants, magic, and folklore, and probably even some evil plants. I didn't even know that was a real thing, but we're going to get into that. And don't forget, we're live on the Fringe FM. That is the network to be on, the Fringe FM, KTLK digital broadcasting. Monday through Friday nights is when you can hear this show every single night, and we like to talk about all things cool, weird, strange, phenomenal, super normal, paranormal, you name it. And I know we got some new listeners, so I want to thank you all for coming along and supporting. And we've got new supporters, and it's great. We're growing. Really appreciate it. Don't forget Monday night, too, this coming May the 20th. You can sign up for the free Get the Tea webinar with Ronnie McMullen. We'll be there to give away a free prize as well as an exclusive discount code, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's when we're going to be there. Sign up for the newsletter on the website, free. Just put your name and email in there. You get it totally free. That's all you got to do. And we send out, it's like bi-monthly. And I think that's because partially I'm busy and partially but I'm lazy. But I always make sure that when I send you out something, we don't spam you to death. And secondly, that you get free stuff. So remember, free stuff. Everybody loves that. Give us a follow on social media. And head over to ufoseekers.com, which is backed and supported by the Fringe FM and Lighting the Void. If you have a sighting, you can give them a call at 661-UFO-7889. Go to their website, ufoseekers.com. Check out their YouTube channel. Like no other, Tim and Tracy take you on their investigations with them. It's the real deal. youtube.com/UFO Seekers. So this is a subject that we haven't really got to get into on the show much, but I've always kind of thought that in nature there was something more than just what we've been taught scientifically about this plant life. You know, I'm a star watcher. And speaking of which, I told you it's a beautiful night here in the natural state. The fireflies are out. The moon is pretty much shining on brightening everything. The cat's in the window looking at it because he wants to go outside. But there is something truly magical about plant life, about nature. And when you look at it, you start studying nature, you start to see things like sacred geometry and stuff that is also in the macrocosm of the greater universe. And we all got that feeling that there's something more to this. And so the question of spirituality that's inert in plant life comes up. And I'm not an expert in this by any means, but it's always fascinated me. And when Gordon White came on the program and discussed things like animism, that really turned my ears up. So now we're going to kind of dig into this, and Corinne Boyer is with us. Now, Corinne is a folk herbalist, teacher, and writer with a passion for traditions surrounding plants and folk magic. She has been studying and working with plants since 1998, and she's taught community herb classes since 2005 and teaches weekly classes out of her home with a focus on wildcrafting, medicine working, plant lore, folk medicine, and traditional magic. She has been published in various journals with articles about plant lore and history. She has created a free quarterly herbal newsletter called The Gathering Basket and distributed to her local community since 2012. Her first book is Under the Witching Tree, published by Trory Books, and is a part of a trilogy with 2 forthcoming volumes. And her second book, which is, check out this title, it's Plants of the Devil, right? And we're going to talk about that too. And she lives with her family in the forest of the Pacific Northwest, and her website is maplemistwood.com. And thank you so much for coming on Lighting the Void. Corinne, it's good to have you.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, I want to find out about this right off the bat. Are there evil plants that we need to be staying away from? Is that a real thing?
Well, it depends on who you ask and how sensitive you are and how much you're paying attention, I suppose. But, you know, evil's a strong word. So
sure.
I teach classes from my home, and, you know, we talk about all sorts of things and go on all sorts of tangents. But evil is something that's kind of fascinating to me. It's a big word. I don't feel
Misunderstood,
I don't
maybe?
know. Yeah, for real. Yeah, and I don't feel like what one person would call evil, it's going to be different than the next person. But in general, I feel like true evil in the human world and the spirit world, and I suppose in the plant world, is pretty rare. That's been my experience when working with this kind of thing. It's not terribly common. We are exposed in Western culture to like Hollywood, right? So we get a lot of scare kind of stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a lot less truly evil out there. But my interest is, working with, I always like to say that I like to work with the dark sides of nature and the light sides, both, of course. But it feels to me in the alternative world, things are pretty kind of sugar-coated, and we're missing a lot of that darker underbelly, so to speak. So that's been my interest. So if you want me to answer that question really directly, are there such things as evil plants we need to look out for? I would say no, but I would say in the natural environment and in the wild places in general, there are spirit energies that could be maybe plant, but also related to supernatural spirits that have been here a lot longer than humans. Some people call those spirits fairy spirits or nature spirits that are dangerous to humans. Absolutely. Would I call them evil? No. Does that make sense in a
Sure.
nutshell?
Well, yeah, I've had some pretty bad run-ins with some poison ivy and poison oak before, and that's just a defense mechanism for the plant, right? But it really whooped me up.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, there's physical toxins and spines and poison, of course, but when we're talking about like spiritual dangers, that's what I'm talking about. Not being scratched or stung by the nettles, but I'm talking about something else, like historically, what I like to call the enchanted worldview is the way that I approach things, because I think it's the ways of all of our ancestors. You mentioned animism, and we'll talk about that in a little bit probably, but it's like that enchanted worldview includes the invisible world, and there's a lot going on that I think people have been kind of that we've lost some of those connections big time, and some of the sensitivities and nuance around working within that world. And there, it's not all like, oh, all plants are benevolent, everything's peaceful and white light. That's not the history in any given culture when relating with nature, but and plants. But it's definitely not true in practical experience either, in my experience.
So we're missing out on something. I feel like that too. I think technology has taken over so much that we've forgotten our roots. And when I go out in nature, I always think, it makes me think about, how you have those shower thoughts, like, are these things alive? Are these plants alive? What's all this about? Because they're not just there for no reason. You talk to a scientist and they say, well, they get real scientific with you about it. But to me, the beauty of it tells me that there's something else going on. You know what I'm saying?
For sure. Yeah. We're all, every human is evolved to work with plants. I always tell my students when we're learning, because, we start with basic identification and medicine making and how to use the plant physically, but I always have a historical bent, and because that's my passion, and I like to talk about the magical uses too. But you have to be able to identify a plant to even know how to make a tincture or cough syrup out of it as well. It's really important. Otherwise, it feels really disconnected. But it's like I always tell my students that we're all evolved to learn plants because we have to have them to survive. So there's like we're meant to be in a relationship with them. Absolutely, So it can seem overwhelming. I remember one time when I was in my early 20s and I had been studying the plants out here. I moved to Washington from Michigan when I was 21, and I was like obsessed, with plants. Even then, I started working with them, like academically when I was about 19. But I remember then going out in the woods with a friend or whatever, and I had already learned a bunch of the local plants within a couple of years, and I remember showing her this or that and this and that and going along, and she looks at me and she says, I don't understand, everything looks the same. All these leaves look the same to me. They just look like green leaves. And I said, I was like, well, yeah. I could see where you'd think that. But it was interesting. I thought about that for a long time, and I thought our brain has to develop a sensitivity to learn the plants, and it just takes time and some experience and patience. But it's almost like to start to discern the textures and the colors and the shapes, it doesn't happen right away if we're not used to like looking into a forest every day or whatever,
Sure.
But after a while, when you start to notice, when you start to pay attention to the details, you start to really notice the differences. I mean, and they're very sensory, and that's how we learn. We learn from seeing and smelling and touching, tasting and all that. But it's really, it's right there under the surface. It's not far away from us.
So in your book, Plants of the Devil, do you go into more of the folklore and magical side of plants, I'm assuming then?
Yeah. All three of the books I've written so far, it's all folklore and historical, medicinal and magical things. But in Plants of the Devil, it really in some ways, and that's by Three Hands Press, but that book is really some of the darkest folklore about plants that I've found. So it was inspired by, over the years, I got into the genre of folklore, and I always say the first 10 years I studied plants, I learned all the physical things, all of the medicine making and identification and all of this and that, how to use it for my family and myself. And then the second 10 years I specialized in this more spiritual aspects of the plant. So dream work and the folklore and history and traditional magical, uses. And so over like studying and reading and this and that, I'd come across these occasional pieces of information that would say this and that plant is associated with the devil or whatever. And I just thought, wow, that's so interesting, like associated with evil for this or that reason. And so eventually I wanted to put together all of this lore into one place, and it was really satisfying to do that. So yeah, it's a lot of the Plants of the Devil is special in that it's a lot of folklore, but it's also my own personal experience too, kind of interwoven throughout the lore. And I do that because I don't want it to just be a dry academic text, because my interest is actually the interface between spirit power and human power, like where do they meet? What does that actually look like, whether it's between plants or spirits of the dead or whatever, nature spirits, where is that interface? Like, what is that really like? I want to, get in there and know. So that's a lot of it is mixed, mixed between, there's quite a bit of folklore, but it's fascinating stuff. Like, it really gives a sense of how people of the past worked with plants. It's so much cooler than the modern ways. It just is. It's so much more interesting and inclusive, and has a huge spectrum of use that we would never dream of. For example, the willow tree, weeping willows, an ornamental out here where I am, but probably maybe where you are. I don't know if it's native there, but there's a lot of different native species everywhere, right? Salix, multiple
we've
species,
got just about every tree you can imagine.
Yeah, I'm sure you got willow trees.
Oh, yeah. And when I hear
right?
the evil trees, right, I think about pine trees, which they're probably not evil.
Oh,
but the reason
really?
why I think they're evil is because they bring all the bugs and ticks and chiggers and all this stuff around, We got pine trees everywhere here. But
yeah,
I'm a little more concerned with the spiritual aspect of things, because I'm starting to realize, like, I'll give you an example. This is when I first started thinking that there was something to plants being sentient and alive. Is, my dad used to have this septic system issue, which is kind of gross, so I won't go into that, but I used to have to dig and shovel ditches to try to fix it. And what I started noticing is the tree roots, they would go towards certain things, but when certain things got in their way, they would go around them. And it was really weird. They never really hit it and then went around it. It was like almost, even in some cases, a foot before it would hit something like the edge of a house or concrete.
They could sense it or something.
Yeah, and it would go around it. I'm like, how in the hell is it doing that? And I asked my dad when I was a kid, I was like, what's that about? Oh, I don't know. They just do that. Okay. Well, to me, this thing's alive in some form or fashion.
Oh, definitely. Well, I mean, the thing that helps me understand some of the more invisible powers, like maybe that we can't just see on the surface, that aren't super obvious, is thinking about that every plant has, an energy that surrounds it from thousands and thousands of years of use. from different traditions and people and culture, right? So all of the uses are around that plant energetically. It's like it has a trace. So I think that if you get sensitive enough, you can see and sense the trace and internalize what some of those uses are and what it feels like. So, for example, that willow tree, a lot of people associate willow with childhood and like whimsical feelings, and a lot of times they're near, I mean, obviously they're water-loving trees, so they're by the riverside or they're swampy areas, and watery places are often inhabitable for humans. You know, you can't develop a watery swamp, not generally, without a lot of resource. And so they kind of tend to be onto their own, so to speak. But if you ever go to an old willow tree, a really big one that's, 100 years old or something or whatever, like some of the ones around here by the creek sides are partly broken and hollow and have parasites, and they're just crazy looking. But you go and you feel that, you stand by that tree and you sense something dark, something intense. It's not just that whimsical feeling from, like the weeping willow in the neighborhood. It's really different, and there's a reason for it. It's not for nothing. It's like, that's what's so cool about the folklore. It really confirms a lot of the experiences, that I've had, just kind of sensing, the plant's alive and it has an intelligence, but it's also different than humans. We're not the same. So
sure. And when I think of folklore, it makes me think of stories and myths, but deep down I still feel like there is something totally real about folklore. If you take, and we've brought this example up before, like J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy, that's a perfect example of author making up folklore to enrich the fictional cultures. And he wrote a whole book, the Silmarillion, given the folklore mythology of the elves. Of course, the entire Lord of the Rings saga was influenced by Nordic and Welsh and Finnish stuff.
Exactly.
Everybody knows that. But he had plenty of excellent source material to draw from. But when the elves would tell him, hey, go pick this plant or that plant and it'll help heal. Do you know what it looks like? I thought, man, that is really cool. And then they would say some certain spell or whatever, and it's not real at first, but if you really start thinking about it and you put intention into it and you study magic and all the correspondence and stuff to it, there probably is something real to it. And that's what I'm curious about.
Oh, for sure. Traditional magic and lore, when I think of folklore, the simplest way to think of it is like of the people, folk, right? So of the people, which means something that's available and accessible and kept in oral tradition in any given society at any given time. So if you go back far enough, if we're talking about folk magic, if you go back far enough in any culture, any part of the world, you'll find the bare bones of the folk magical system underneath other, religions or this or that. You can tease out kind of like the bones of the folk magic. There's a reason that you get a sense that there's something to it. It's because if all of our ancestors believed in it for like thousands and thousands of years, that's got a lot of standing. And so it's in our blood and in our psychic, memory and our DNA to have like, be drawn to it and kind of have this curiosity and this sense, even in our modern culture where magic is, pretty much absent except for in Hollywood. But it's amazing, like what you're saying, that it's that even what you're noticing about when you're reading these things, that there's something to it, And I love that because it shows that it's really just under the surface. It's not that far away. 150 years ago is not that long ago. 100 even years, and 50 years in some parts of like Appalachia and where you are in the Ozarks, where the folklore and some of this oral tradition that had superstition, and some people would call it superstitious, but some people, if you look at it in a different way, it had that connection to higher power that wasn't, God or religion, that was part of like nature. So there's a reason it's there.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but are you a practicing a magician or practicing witch, or what would you call yourself?
I call myself a folk practitioner, but
a folk practitioner, okay.
Yeah, the labels, I am practicing in the sense of I do a lot of personal practice. I've done some professional practitioner work, very little. I teach more than I do practitioner work, but I've been trained to do it through traditional, actually Scandinavian folk magic called trolldom. my teacher, Johannes Gardbach, and I worked together for a couple of years and recently finished up some studies with that. So I have some training professionally, but I I actually prefer groups a lot to individuals. So, but in terms of practicing, yeah, I do my own stuff and there's a reason I don't like to go around saying that I'm a witch or a magician or a sorcerer,
It's not a good idea.
It's fine. I don't, yeah, it's not really. I like that quote. Ronald Hutton says it's only safe to call yourself a witch in a society that doesn't believe in magic.
Well, yeah,
which is true,
and there are other societies as we speak right now. I was reading some articles the other day over in the East where, they don't treat you very nice. They execute you still to this day for stuff like that.
Absolutely, yeah. In a culture that believes in magic, you would never go around proclaiming you were a witch, ever. You go down to parts of Africa and, parts out east, and where magic is very much alive and real, and that's the last thing you want to be. So,
yeah, I think
I kind of like folk practitioner. Mm-hmm.
People misunderstand my intentions. A lot of times people think that we're here to do a show about magic, but it's not really that. I'm trying to understand the fundamental metaphysical principles behind all of this stuff, because I think it ties into everything that we talk about. We've talked about DMT a lot and how it's in just about everything in the planet. But if that's the case, and there is some type of crazy consciousness to it, then that means that all these other plants have something else going on. There's something else going on, and it's trying to intellectually understand it is difficult sometimes. So I think through our own personal experience, we kind of know these truths. And I wonder, did you get into this because you were interested in it, or did you have an experience with these things that got you involved?
Yeah, I feel it's kind of a more than one part answer, but I always felt really drawn to the forest when I was young, when I was a little girl, always, and to the kind of wild places that weren't so human occupied, and definitely to old places and old homes and abandoned places and graveyards. But the plants, like, there was something about, I kind of, on a personal note, I always say that the plants saved my life. They saved me from kind of a crazy childhood and experience or whatever. But because they're so beautiful, and they felt so safe to me, and they felt just like I felt more comfortable in the forest alone than I did like in at a party or something, or in the mall or whatever. So I guess I was always drawn to plants, and I didn't know their names. I didn't know anything about them at all. I wasn't in a family where that was much of a thing. My uncle was always really into plants, but I wasn't around him as much as I would have liked to have been. But yeah, and then I did have an experience that was really incredible, and I've said it. I think I've talked about it before, but it's not with you, but on a different one. But it was really, I'll never forget it. So I think I was about 15 or 14, maybe I was 14, and I was at a family function for my stepmother at the time, who I didn't know her family. I didn't know anybody there. Essentially, I was there with my brother and my dad, and they were busy. So it was gorgeous summer, and we were by the forest, and I went on a walk by myself kind of at dusk. So, you know how the lighting gets. It's like the glow is on everything, and it was, in June in Michigan, so it was like glorious time before it gets really farther along. It's just like that bright green. And I remember coming upon, I kind of got lost for a little bit, just wandering around, being open, and I love that. I love the feeling of just being led in the woods and not knowing what I'm going to see next. But I came upon this glade, and it was kind of an opening, and there were these flowers that looked super otherworldly. They were almost like a pale lavender color, and they were really pretty close to the grass, like the glade, surrounded by trees. They were maybe like 10 inches off the ground, and I just got down, and I was so struck by them. They glowed. They essentially were glowing, like this crazy color scheme, and I had never seen them before, and so I touched them, and I picked them, and I smelled them, and they're so fragrant, like the craziest smell, though, almost like spicy and like hot, like I could smell fire or something, and aromatic or whatever. I wouldn't have never known the words to describe it then, but I loved it, and I saved those flowers. I just had this moment where I just knew something about plants. I knew something was big, and I saved those flowers for 5 years in my little, jewelry box, and I eventually found out that plant was Monarda fistulosa, which is wild oregano. That's what it's called. It's a native plant in Michigan. Of course, now I know about it, but I didn't know anything. But I just remember feeling like there was just something with that like draw and that calling that kept happening for me with the plants, where just finding them so beautiful and falling into. It still happens even now. Like 20 years later, I fall in love with these plants, and just I don't know. It's kind of incredible. So
yeah, hard to explain, like, right? It's hard to explain.
Yeah, kind of. When you have a calling and you feel drawn to something and you feel like a kinship. It's almost like a kinship, right? Like I know I'm not a plant or a flower, but like I can somehow understand their language, and I don't know how that is. But some of us are more called to something than some things than other things. But
sure, yeah. Do some people? Well, we got to take a break here, but do some people use plants for things like talismans or even curses? Do they use plants for things like that?
Oh, of course.
Okay, cool. Well, you know what? We'll talk about that. Yeah, when we come
Absolutely.
back, you guys, you can call in if you want. It's 1-800-588-0335. If you got any questions for Corinne, you can text in at 501-777-5631 or ask a question in either one of our chat rooms. I'm Joe Roop. This is Lighting the Void. We're live on the Fringe FM. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Howdy, this is Catalina, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
This is Crow 777, and you are listening to The Fringe FM.
We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling, the ground shook, you could hear rushing water, and then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails, stores with their shelves stripped bare, ATMs can't operate, deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand three truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137. Now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247. Now only $147 shipped in one business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts.
I'm Ryan Gable, and I want to remind you to keep your radio, phone, tablet, or computer tuned to the Fringe FM, and visit the website thefringe.fm to listen to the entire lineup of shows. You can also catch my broadcast, The Secret Teachings, Monday through Friday, beginning at 12 a.m. midnight U.S. Pacific Time, right here on the Fringe FM.
Do you want to know the truth? Are UFOs real? Are aliens visiting Earth? Are governments around the world hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO Seekers, official partner of the Fringe FM, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Join us as we investigate locations like Area 51 by subscribing on YouTube at youtube.com/UFO Seekers.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop, live on the Fringe FM. Don't forget it, for limited time, what we're going to do is if you do actually grab a package, a food package, the big one, or if you spend more than $100 at preparewiththefringe.com, I'm going to give away a free Lighting the Void t-shirt to you. So I know a couple of you have already done that. But I'm already getting questions though about the size and all that. It's just the basic Lighting the Void t-shirt, but it's a good t-shirt. So take advantage of that while we're doing it. We're here with Corinne Boyer, and we're talking about magic, plants, and folklore. And I think one of the biggest questions I have, Corinne, is how do people use plants magically? I think because I'm already getting some text-ins about that. I know it's in certain spells, but how do you know? Well, just how do people use it magically, first off?
Oh, well, honey, how much time do we have?
We got a little bit here.
They use it in every way you can imagine. So it depends on the plant. If we're looking at history, and then we can talk about, some of the questions after you read a lot of the folklore is like, what does this have to do with modern life? But we can get there in a little bit. But it's like the history of plants. So practically speaking, if you look at plants as what I like to call materia magica. So there's a couple different ways you can integrate plants into magical work, okay? So the first thing is materia magica. That means the magical materials instead of materia medica, which is medical materials. So the magical materials are, it's like when you do some sort of spell work or ritual work or a charm, and there's differences. Those terms can sometimes be used interchangeably depending on how you define those. So we could talk about that for an hour. But when you have some sort of magical act that you're going to do, materia magica is used to enhance that magical act. So materia magica can fall under the categories of plant, animal, or mineral. So, you could use stones, you can use animal parts, you can use plants. This has happened in history, and of course we can still do this now. So plants can be applied in all sorts of ways in terms of enhancing the power of whatever kind of magical operation you're doing. So, for example, you're doing like a healing spell for your friend, right? So your friend is, having, really bad menstrual cramps. So you decide to maybe use blackberry root because there's actually some physical evidence for that helping with that, but there's a lot of kind of dark feminine powers about that plant, so maybe you want to do some transference magic. So when you look at folk magical operations in general, it can get a little confusing with how do we break it down? How do we understand like the parameters of folk magic? So transference magic is just one aspect of transferring something that you don't want into something else. So you could go to the blackberry plant and you could take, some of your friend's hair and say, and you speak your spell out loud, your invocation, you say, blackberry, I'm bringing this pain from my friend. I'm going to leave it with you. You take care of it. I'm leaving it here, or whatever. And you make an offering, and then you turn around without looking back and you go in silence. So that's just one example of actually going to a plant for transference magic. A lot of trees have been utilized for that historically too. So where they're actually part of like a folk rite, and then maybe like what you were saying with the talisman or an amulet, for sure. So, troubled by nightmares, well, you can take flowering thyme. It's like a wild species of thyme, like our cooking thyme, but a wild species. And you could put it in a pillow, like a dream pillow, and you keep it along with St. John's wort, and you sleep with it next to your head at night before you go to sleep to keep away nightmares. So that's like an apotropaic application. What that means is preventative, like protective. So that's kind of like a passive way to use it, whereas going to that blackberry plant's a little bit more active. You're actually asking that plant to help you with something. So whether you're incorporating different parts of the plant, be it, the dried flowers or whatever, dried or fresh flowers, leaves, roots, berries, stem, whatever, spines, into pouches and amulets, into powders, making oils that are anointing oils. So one thing I think of is like if somebody's troubled by some sort of spirit, like say they go to a cemetery and they get a spirit stuck on them and they're bothered by it, the best thing to do is talk to the spirit directly, but not everybody's comfortable doing that. So you could also use a combination of St. John's wort infused oil along with dragon's blood tincture, equal parts. So you kind of do an anointment and a cleansing with that, for example, or a cleansing bath with birch. So those are just things I'm rattling off on the top of my brain.
Yeah, but that's
I could
really
talk
cool.
about it for a long time.
So all of
totally.
this stuff has elemental, I'm assuming, elemental and maybe astrological correspondences as well, possibly?
A lot of it. Yeah, a lot of it has, when you look at Nicholas Culpeper's work and some of the astrologers from the, last 500 years, there's some disagreement on certain things. But yeah, you definitely find astrological correspondence, which is interesting. In both books, Under the Witching Tree and Under the Bramble Arch. So Under the Witching Tree that I wrote, it's 20 different trees. They're folklore, folk medicine, and a bunch of my personal uses. And then Under the Bramble Arch, which is also from Troy Books, that's the second one of the trilogy. So that one is the wild plants. So, violet and rose and nettle and dandelion. And it has the same thing. And I did put the astrological correspondences in those chapters. So 20 plants and 20 trees. If you read those books, you'll find a million examples of how to use the plants magically, because that's my interest, my passion,
That's very cool.
And medicinally. So.
Yeah, that is cool. So both medicinally and magically, which kind of is a double whammy. That's pretty cool.
I want to do both, right? Because if you have you should be able to make wine with the plants and make syrups and tinctures and know how to use them when you're sick, and also use them for love magic if you need to.
Nice. Looks like we got Dan from Chicago on the line. Hey, Dan, what's going on?
Hey, not too much. Great show.
You got a question for Corinne?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
So I have an art studio that I've been renting, and it's it's in a backyard with a nice little unkept garden, and there's definitely just a vibe about this place that I feel like I was literally drawn here. Just the circumstances of my life just brought me to this place. So my question for you, the two primary plants that sort of weed here that I notice are mugwort and fern. And I was wondering if you could give me like a very magical explanation for like what that might mean. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. So tell me, with the mugwort, so is it Artemisia vulgaris, so it's like the common European mugwort?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the genus or whatever.
Okay, and then the fern, what kind of fern
and,
is it?
Made tea with it.
Oh, good, great.
The fern
okay.
is the kind. They just sprouted, and it's the kind that kind
bracken?
of pops up.
Yeah, bracken
I'm not
fern.
Totally sure. It rolls up like a shrimp or something, and then
Yeah, totally. They look like
unwinds.
A weird little snaky thing, kind of snaky.
Yeah, exactly.
At first, and then they open and they get really tall, right?
Yeah, they get real bushy.
Yeah, and then when they dry, are they like almost red on the ground, like the litter from the leaf? I think it's bracken fern.
Yeah,
it's
right now at the point where it's sprouted like that. So yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's really cool. So the mugwort, the Artemisia vulgaris, so that is a really special plant. There's a lot to say about that. There's some lore that talks about that plant increasing clairvoyance, so talking about, increasing psychic abilities and enhancing dreams. Some people, I have students, maybe 10 or 15% of my students will not even be able to have that plant in the house because it'll mess their dreams up so much they'll have nightmares or really intense dreams that are disturbing. I like it personally, not that I have that experience, but I don't have bad dreams from it. But some people do. So if that's you, you'll probably know. The best way to know is hang a bundle of that above your bed and see what happens, the fresh bundle. But otherwise, yeah, you can use it in small amounts before bed and tea, not because it would be bad to drink a bunch, because it would be okay. It's just that you don't have to wake up in the middle of the night to pee, but you could try like half a cup of the tea before going to bed to see what it does for your dreams, see if you notice a difference, and kind of do it like every other night to gauge, like, is this doing anything or not? Yeah, and like what you said with smoking it. So dream enhancement, psychic ability. Also, historically it was used to keep away the evil eye. So the evil eye it's a universal concept magically that any kind of, basically what it means is envy or bitterness or jealousy, so that somebody else, even if they don't know they're doing it, that they can energetically give you like some sort of sickness or bad fortune by their jealousy. So it is helpful for protection. What you can do with that is, you can burn it as an incense. So a cool thing about it, if you dry it and then you strip it from the stem and you rub it between your fingers and your hands and your palms and you kind of make like a fluff out of it, you can make it into kind of like an incense cone, actually, like just form it and then you light it. It's the Chinese moxa. It's actually the base for Chinese moxibustion, which is, helpful for opening acupuncture points. But it'll smell really good, so you could burn it like in your home when you're doing any kind of house cleansing. So burn the mugwort instead of like sage or something. Do mugwort. I feel like it's more protective anyway. And also, interestingly, it was helpful historically for protecting the dead. So when you look at funerary plants, protecting the living left behind from the dead. So basically helpful for hauntings and ghosts too. It's a plant I think about that's deeply cleansing. So you can make a strong tea and add salt to it and use it on your thresholds, like of your home or whatever. So those are just some ideas magically that I think of off the top of my head with mugwort.
You smoke the plants? You can smoke.
You can.
Huh. Well, yeah, duh.
Totally.
I mean, we smoke plants anyways, but I can't imagine smoking other plants. But that actually helps you, huh?
Yeah, well, you can use it as an incense or fumigation. Some people smoke it in I have friends that do herbal cigarettes, and they smoke mugwort with a little bit of lavender or mugwort with red raspberry leaf. It's one of their favorites.
It sounds like that's right
up your alley. Is that helpful for the mugwort, Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually kind of played with that last summer, and then I was kind of just, it's funny. I seeded a mugwort plant myself, but then when it was sprouting here, I realized there was it was overflowing the entire garden. The
That's
main
crazy.
plants in the garden, because it's just unkept, like the tenants don't do anything. So the primary weed is mugwort, and I was trying to cultivate it, but I'm I already am.
That's so funny.
On top of a patch. But what about the
That's
fern?
awesome.
Just because that's really striking, the way the ferns sort of take over the garden too, and I feel like a presence for sure.
Wait a minute, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Why did you say that was funny?
I think it's funny. It's ironic because I've had the same experience with cottonwood trees, for example, when I was looking for them all over and couldn't find them, and then found one in my backyard. Kind of a thing where the plants are coming. It's like plants showing up. You're trying so hard, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, wait a minute, this plant's here everywhere. I love that. I love when that happens. That's why I think it's ironic.
Oh, okay. All right. So go with the fern. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the bracken fern. So that plant is associated with the magical fern seed. Is the biggest piece of folklore that I think about with it, which is super fascinating. It's basically a Northern European piece of folklore that has a lot of variances, which means it shifts and changes. So depending on whether you're in Russia or Germany or whatever, Britain, or whatever British Isles. So what it is that at different times of the year on the high nights, I think of that as the historical auspicious eves of the year for kind of the Northwestern European ancestors or any ancestors. But basically there are certain times, like, for example, Halloween, Hallows Eve is one, and Christmas Eve is one, and Beltane Eve is one, and Midsummer's Eve is one. Those are the four in the northern Western Europe area that are really big. In terms of magical, the veil is thin, spirits are accessible, you can talk to the dead, you can interact with spirits in a more intense way on those nights, was the belief, and is the belief in a lot of parts, right? So the magical fern seed, it's this, we know that ferns don't make seeds, they make spores. So spores are supposed to be good for nettle stings, by the way, but those spores, it's this piece of flora that talks about at midnight. One variant is like at midnight on Midsummer's Eve, which is June 23rd. So at midnight you go to the fern, the bracken fern, and right at midnight, some of the lore says you'll see golden lights shining from it. Some of the lore says all of a sudden the fern will have, blue or red flowers and drop a seed, and you get that magical fern seed. Some of the lore says you have to fight the devil for the seed. It's crazy. Like all of a sudden the devil will show up and try to take the seed from you. But if you could get that seed, you'd have the strength of 30 men. You could win all the women. You could have good luck in gambling, whatever, all these good things.
That.
But Yeah, not bad. If you can get the seed from the devil, though, that's the thing. So, but it's really interesting. It's kind of like, it sounds like a fairy tale a bit, but really, the prevalence of that lore is huge. Like it's in all the books of folklore about plants. You'll find some variant, some sort of variant on that bracken fern. So that's just the one that comes to the top of my head. So it's kind of like, I always think of it as a mystical plant. I have it growing here in the woods too, and I agree that there's some sort of kind of snake-like presence to it, and then also this like some sort of like, it's almost like a locked door. That's how I feel. Like you need a key to open it. You don't quite know what it has, because it's not necessarily like some medicinal plant that you're going to be seeking.
Sure.
It's not some highly sought, and it's not.
Does that help you out, Dan?
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like it's right up your alley. Dreams and everything.
Oh yeah, totally. That was great information.
That's awesome. So yeah, I wonder.
Impressed.
So you don't live there? I was going to say you could go out there on Midsummer's Eve and see what happens at midnight. Let me know.
Oh yeah, I'm always here late night. It's like my little pad, But
oh, perfect.
Definitely, like
do that.
It's got a cabin in the woods vibe, even though it's in the suburbs. But last year when the ferns were coming up, I was kind of pulling them like they were weeds, and they had that weird snake shape. So I was kind of like, get these out of here.
Yeah.
But then when they bloomed,
yeah,
I
have
was
you
like,
looked at their roots? They're super weird.
Yeah,
you should look at the roots.
They're definitely weird plants, but when they bloom, then they give you that like Lord of the Rings, like rainforest vibe or something. I'm definitely not going to pull them this year.
Cool.
Right. Well, thanks for calling, Dan. I really appreciate it,
Thanks
brother.
for the questions. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, thank you guys. Have a good night.
You too, bro.
Yeah, you too.
What is there a plant that we could use, like say it like me, because I don't know about any of this stuff. Apparently, I need to get your books, right, so I can learn these things.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
is there a plant that we could go out and get right now that would help protect us psychically, magically, maybe, that so yeah, go out and get this and hang it up or whatever, or put it in your house?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I don't know your terrain. I only know my terrain, but I bet you said you have a lot of different trees, right?
Oh yeah, we got oak, we've got cottonwood, we've got pine trees, everything. A lot of pine trees, though.
Yeah, you were saying that. Do you have the rowan tree or the mountain ash?
I don't even know what that is, but I'm assuming we do.
Okay.
But probably.
You probably do. But I would say, I mean, just with the list, just with those three, I would say the oak for sure. But in terms of, trees are nice because maybe not everything's blooming right now in terms of flowers. So for protection psychically or magically, the rowan tree, though, the Sorbus acuparia, that's the European rowan tree with the red berries. I bet you'd see it. It's planted ornamentally in a lot of neighborhoods. I bet if you saw it, you'd be like, oh my God, I see that everywhere.
Yeah.
You should look up rowan tree and look up the pictures, but I bet you'd find it, and it's blooming right now where I am at. I don't know how warm you are down you're probably ahead of me, more southern, but
everything's in
you
bloom
could hang
right
that
now
up.
Down here. It's green as green.
I bet
can
the rowan
get.
tree's in bloom. And we just passed May Eve, so we're approaching Midsummer's Eve. This is a really good time. When you look at like magical herb harvesting lore, it's kind of sparse, right? But there's some, and a lot of it is about May Eve or Midsummer's Eve, picking of the plants. And when you think about it, the sun is at its highest, right? The climactic point. So this is a good time to get it. So see if you can find some rowan leaves and twigs, and then you hang them with red thread or ribbon above your windows and doors, and it's really, really, really good for that. Another one is the hawthorn tree. You have hawthorn?
I'm sure I do. Matter of fact, I'm pretty
so
sure
the thorns
we do,
on that, I bet you do.
Yeah, it's like when I go out in the woods, I'm like, ew, pretty trees, right? That's the way I look at it. But most of the time, I can spot an oak tree, I can spot a cottonwood, I can spot a pine tree pretty easily. But there are some trees that I just don't know what they are.
Yeah, you probably have apple trees. Those are.
Oh yeah.
Those. Yeah. So if you get my book, the oak and the pine and the cottonwood are in there. You could do so much with just those three. Even if you just pick a few trees and focus on them, you'd be amazed at the uses. And then the good thing is you get to try it for yourself and see, does this work? Does this affect things? That's the best, is to put the lore into practice and learn. That's what I love to do.
And that'll keep the spooks out, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Because I got a feeling I got a lot of spooks around here. I even have weird dreams. Yeah, I mean, I have weird dreams of walking around the property at night. And you know how sometimes when you're in a dream, you think you don't know you're in a dream, right? Especially when you're on your property and you're just doing normal things. And weird paranormal activity will happen in the dream, like things will shake and rattle and float. And I'm like, what is it? And then I start saying, oh, yeah, I'm dreaming. Okay, but this is still kind of freaky. And I'm always alone and nobody's around. So there's got to be something going on out here.
Yeah. Do you have acreage or a double lot or something? Is it a big piece of property?
Well, it's on like 5 acres out here. And then,
oh, wow, nice.
Yeah, we've got a pond in the back and then it goes all the way. There's another 20 that goes to the tree line. So we got a lot of land out here.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And is it an old house?
Yes. Yeah, it's not really old, but old enough. It's
like 20s?
No, it's not that old.
Okay, like 50s or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see, like, when you walk around your land or whatever and the buildings and dwellings, to notice, like, what parts of it or trees or areas or buildings feel like there's, like, that sense of, like, something doesn't quite feel normal here, just to, like, pay attention. You probably know right off the top of your head already.
Well, all I know is in the front of the house we've got, and I'm might be saying this wrong, but it's one of those, is it a magnolia tree that's got the flowers that come out of it?
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty. Mm-hmm.
That thing, it's weird because when I have the dream, it's never there. It's gone. Like I don't see it.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah, it's not there.
Whoa, that's super interesting.
But in life, it's here. That's the weird part about it.
That's a trip. And you have that dream, it's kind of reoccurring, it sounds like?
Yeah, I've had it a few times. Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
It's like I'll walk up to the front door and it's not there. And I'm like, where's the tree at? Oh, well, and it doesn't even register that I'm dreaming and just keep moving around.
Wow. That's super interesting. The magnolia trees, they're a really primitive tree. They've been around. Their original whatever species was around since, like, dinosaurs. They were originally pollinated by beetles. They were before bees. Isn't that interesting? They're really old. But, of course, we have cultivars, so they've been selected. But still, I always think of that tree as, like, a really old, primitive tree.
So there's a ton of plants and trees that we can use for protection. And I'm assuming that you have all the stuff in your book. Another thing is I like to look at is the correspondences. And this is something I learned when I was studying Kabbalah. I was like, what is this tree of life thing, this glyph? But then I started learning there's certain plants that correspond with certain planets and astrological signs and even paths and Sephiroth on the tree of life. And I would read books where people would say, look, if you see this plant in a dream or something, then you're in this area in the spirit world. And that's the kind of stuff I'm interested in because I was asking you during the break, we're trying to intellectually understand metaphysical things, and that's very hard to explain, but I try to.
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, right, because it's a whole different experience, and we don't have the language really to articulate our experience.
For sure. Yeah, and we're already at the top of the hour. I told you this was going to go by quick.
It does, it's flying.
It does. It goes by fast. Look, if you want to call in, I see some of you guys' text ins. I'll get to them, I promise. The call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. We're here with Corinne Boyer. We'll be right back.
Hola, Fringe listeners. This is Dave Cruz of Beyond the Strange, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Alex X.
Hi, I'm Alex Exum, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Get the Tea is the #1 cleansing tea in America. We cleanse you with organic ingredients, and when used daily, you can increase your energy. Cleanse from intruders that set up camp in your colon. Cleanse your colon and feel the difference. Colon cleanses can be uncomfortable. Not Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea is mild yet truly effective. Cleanse your insides every day. Easy to make, easy to use, and feel the results. Are you sold? Okay, then here's how to order. Log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Look for our specials on the front page. Get the Tea also carries top-rated supplements for those who care about their health naturally. Again, log on to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com and feel the results. And for those of you that arm yourself with information, come to our webinar every other Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's every other Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific. You can sign up at getthetea.com.
The Fringe FM isn't just a radio station. We also provide services for all your audio production needs. If you are interested in live radio or pre-recorded podcasts, we're here to help. We even do audio enhancements and voiceovers if needed. If you want to do a podcast or live radio show and even want the option to syndicate on terrestrial radio, from simple audio file enhancement to live production and call screening, we have you covered. We have worked with some of the best professionals in the business in order to provide coaching instruction for content creation, show structure, and more. Contact The Fringe Digital Media for more at info@thefringe.fm. That's info@thefringe.fm. Or call 501-777-5631 for a consultation.
Did you know that qualified patients can access medical cannabis in all 50 states? CannaSense is a medical cannabis collective that helps patients in all 50 states gain access to cannabis medication. CannaSense does this with a streamlined process and strict compliance with the Compassionate Use Act of 1996, the Affordable Care Act, and the U.S. Constitution. It is important for each patient to understand the legalities involved, the costs, and the benefits of cannabis medication. Through truth, legalization, and education, the medical benefits of cannabis will supplant recreational perceptions, and the real vision for change will be realized. Let the people and their personal doctors take control of their medical cannabis decisions before the greed of big business takes over. The tipping point for change is today, and CannaSense is ready to lead the charge and enable legal access for all qualified patients to medical cannabis through its proven system. For more information, go to thefringe.fm/care or click the banner on the website today.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
AncientLifeOil.com. For your CBD needs, just remember, AncientLifeOil.com. What does it do for the body, you ask? I can't say to the people in the suits that run the industry. Big Pharma's all over CBD because of its well, you know what I mean. Research the benefits of CBD on Google and come back to AncientLifeOil.com and purchase your CBD today. Non-GMO and all organic. You don't want to be using a petroleum product. You want to be using the cleanest CBD product on the market. AncientLifeOil.com. We even have CBD for your pet. Help your pet's discomfort. Help your discomfort. Log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Newly reduced prices to pass off the savings to the most important person. You. AncientLifeOil.com. And one more thing. We have topicals too. So if you have joint pain and some different issues that are going on in your body, you might want to use a topical. Think about it. AncientLifeOil.com.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. You know, we're here with Corinne Boyer. You know, Corinne, I want to say that properly, but one thing that I want to talk about on the broadcast, but I've always had a hard time with it, is when it comes to things like dark magic, black magic, left-hand path, whatever you want to call it. People kind of misunderstand that. But real quick, before we get into that, because I want to get into that with you, This thing happens with magical books online. I see people reselling it for more than what the seller is actually selling it for. So where do people really need to get the book from you?
Yeah, it's a great question. Under the Witching Tree and the new one that's going to be shipped here next week, I think, but Under the Bramble Arch, it's best to go directly to Troy Books' website, because through Amazon, Under the Witching Tree is up to like $270, and that's ridiculous. You can just order it direct from the publisher, and you do have to pay $10 in shipping, which is unfortunate, but the paperback is about $20, so I think you could get it for around $30, which is way better than, $280. And then Plants of the Devil, you can get it directly from Three Hands Press if you want a hardcover or I think there's only a hardcover. There were 4 editions, and there's only hardcover now, and softcover. But you can also get it through Amazon. They have a direct link, and I think it's like $18 for a softback through Amazon. So, yeah, that's the best way, though. I definitely wanted to mention that earlier.
If you guys go shop for the book and you see a $260 price tag, don't email me, and then I'll figure out how to get you the right website. But as you said, it was Troy Books.
Troy Books, yeah. If you just Google Troy Books, it should come up, and then you go to their catalog and you can find it.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
So back to this dark magic stuff. Now, look, I've got a friend that comes on the program, Jeff Harmon, and a couple other friends that this is a touchy subject for them. I think because they're afraid people are going to dabble with it. But he was talking specifically like ritual magic. But I mean, when I grew up, I watched Star Wars, and Lord of the Rings, read those books. I always wanted to be a wizard, right? Like, so being a wizard is cool. It just is.
Yeah,
and you can't be a wizard without knowing, at least studying the dark stuff so you know what you're dealing with, right? So,
Absolutely.
I mean, that's one aspect of it that I think people don't understand. But there's also, it's kind of like when we look at things like demons and bad elementals, I kind of think of it like Saturn, right? So Saturn gets this bad rap all the time because it's a bad planet, but it's just doing its job. And I wonder sometimes if maybe that's what these dark forces are doing, if they're just doing their job.
Right. It's like balance in all things. And really, it is, I think a lot of I've been really drawn to the dark parts of plant work and spirit work in different ways. And it's interesting to find one's comfort zone in all of that. And I think it's a fascinating investigation. It's really important as a person walking a magical path constantly to be interacting with, like, where's our limits, where's our boundaries, where are we out of our comfort zone, where are we in it? What is, what I like to call it, kind of, that helps it make sense to me, is transgressive magic. So when we think about, some of the most taboo things magically that we've been, like taunted by through like stories and movies and mainstream, it's like, my question is always like, what is that really? So, like, of course it's misunderstood. It's like a glamour. It's like a glamour is on the outside of all of that dark stuff to scare most people away, because in truth, Daniel Schulk wrote this in the Occult Reliquary in the introduction, and I love it. It's that he talks about how magic is not meant for everybody, basically, like that. I'm sorry, those aren't his exact words, but it's basically the idea, the what he was talking about with this. He's commenting on a magical collection of art, and it's really incredible. But in just for that purpose, it's easy to misunderstand so many things. So there's one argument, there's one side of the coin that says, oh, magic should be accessible to everybody. Everybody deserves to whatever, or can have this available. And it's kind of like when I was like 16 growing up, reading like the New Age, whatever that was available to me, the pagan stuff. That's how I felt. I believed like magic should be available to everybody, But over the years, I really don't agree with that anymore. I don't think that's true. And so that's a whole other conversation, but I kind of agree that it's not meant for everybody because it's so apt to be misunderstood and abused and exploited. So there's this glamour around the darker things for a reason. There's a reason why they're scary. There's a reason why they're kind of like untouchable. But once you get in there and actually work with it and find your own like sense of it, every single magical practitioner has to take personal accountability and has to have their own ethics and morals. There's no blanket statement about it. Like, that's basically it. So if we all personally take our own accountability and our ethics and our morals and our standards, then and also investigate the darkness with the knowledge of our own limits, I think that's kind of the best we can do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and in some ways, I feel kind of bad for certain things, like let's say animals per se. Some people are drawn to snakes.
Oh,
now,
right.
I can't stand snakes, but then again, I do feel sorry for. I mean, imagine if you were born a snake or something dark, or even spiritually, you were a dark being. Who's going to watch out for you, right? Who's going to take care of you? Who's going to be there for you? Nobody likes you. So
we don't know that, though, but that's just an assumption. We don't know that.
That's the way that's what we've been taught, though, is what I'm saying.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Oh, for sure. Right.
So I think it's a misunderstood thing, too, but
it is. Right, and there's a reason for it.
Yeah, I know some people are drawn to, like humans are drawn to dark stuff naturally. Everybody likes a good scary flick, a horror film. Even Black Sabbath, they said, well, we had a band called Earth, right? And it was Love, Lights, and Unicorns. And they talked about, it was real hippie-ish. And imagine Ozzy Osbourne talking about love, light, and unicorns and hippie stuff, but he realized they weren't selling any records. So until they went to Black Sabbath, he actually said, we noticed people were lined up at a movie called Black Sabbath, and they were lined up out the door. And that's how they named their band. And they just blew up after that.
Yeah. For sure, yeah. It makes sense. I mean, people are drawn to the mysterious, right? The things they don't understand always. So that's good. But it's also, there's a reason why those warnings and the scary movies and stories that used to be stories, exist.
Yeah, for sure.
When humans get, careless and egocentric and power hungry, bad things happen.
So could you give me an example, just one example of how a plant, maybe a dark plant, or how a plant could be used for dark magic? Would that be too much to ask?
No. I wrote an article for the Verdant Gnosis a couple years ago on plants used in cursing magic specifically. Ooh. So it was interesting to me because when we think about cursing, a lot of people, especially in kind of the alternative scenes, will say, oh, that's just that's wrong, and, harm ye none, or whatever. But I always say to my students, desperate times equal desperate measures. And for one person to say, oh, I would never curse anybody, that's probably, it's just an assumption. We don't know what we would or wouldn't do if we were pressed. And so when you think about what a curse is, there's a lot of different ways you can curse somebody, and it's not just like, oh, I curse you in 7 generations to death. There's so many different ways you can curse somebody. You can curse somebody by taking away their courage. You can curse somebody by taking away their luck. You can curse somebody by separating them from their lover. There's all sorts of ways to curse somebody. So it's kind of a complex subject, actually, but it's always been part of the human experience. As far back as we go in any culture, it's there. Just like love magic, which is also totally not ethical and considered black magic. So cursing is just kind of taboo, so we can talk about that. But it's the thing of the example I always give to my students is if, magic in and of itself is working with invisible forces with one's own will to have a specific outcome. I mean, that's one, just quick definition of it, folk magic. And so with cursing, if your sister was married to an abusive husband and she couldn't leave him for various reasons and he wouldn't stop abusing her, and nobody would help. I mean, what do? Would you curse him? Yeah, you'd curse the shit out of him, to bind him maybe, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
you have
whatever.
that case where some women, and this isn't all cases, but where some women just won't leave them and they're constantly making excuses for them. That's what drives me up the wall. It's like, yeah, man, that guy's an axe murderer. Well, he was just having a bad day. Well, no, he's an axe murderer, and they won't listen to you. What do you do there?
Sure, but there's complex reasons why they don't listen. I mean, it's way beyond what appears on the surface. There's so many reasons why, So, I mean, I just have compassion, really. But it's like the thing though, when you're helping your whatever sister who's getting beat up by her whatever. It's easy to say we wouldn't do something, but we don't know what we would do if our own children were being threatened, or if our lives were threatened in ways that, and there wasn't, if the police wasn't responding or whatever. So it's cursing on the outside looks big and bad and scary, but actually when you get a little bit more into the history of it and look at some of the traditions surrounding it, some of it's nasty. Some of it's like, wow. Like even reading some of the charms or spells is like, makes you feel kind of sick, for sure. And you're like, damn, that neighbor would have had to hate that other neighbor to say this shit.
Yeah, like in the Picatrix, it's like that too. There's some things like that.
Some of it. Oh, yeah. Some of it's really intense, but we also can't imagine what somebody else is going through, especially during times when there was at least and this is still true in parts of the world today, where there's so much famine and there's so much disease and there's so much death and there's so people living on the edge of life and death all the time in a different way than the Western world is, So it's like, yeah, it's hard to know how and why people respond with those kind of things, but it's easy to judge from a privileged point of view, and I just feel like that's kind of a cop-out. So I'm more interested in investigating that stuff. So the article, anyway, blackberry is one of the plants in the article. So some of the lore says if you wanted to curse your neighbor's land, so this could be, for the reasons of competition, like, so say your neighbor has a bigger crop than you, then, yours doesn't sell as much and your family starves, whatever. I'm just kind of extrapolating on the information. So it's like, then, and maybe your neighbor slandered you and talked shit about you, and so you lost some
or he's shooting your dog or your cat.
Right.
Yeah, there we go.
Who knows what the neighbor's doing. Yeah. See? There you go. And so then you go to the bramble arch, and that's where the arch is ideally growing on both of your land that's connecting your land, but you could just go to any bramble arch, which is basically a blackberry bramble that's rooted in two spots in the ground, and you can curse your neighbor in the name of the devil under the bramble arch. So whatever kind of, most of these folk operations are missing some information, understandably. And so you can spit 3 times or whatever your offering is, and you invoke, Satan, which of course to us sounds just like crazy and terrible,
scary.
But one of the things you realize, but one of the things you realize is that people in the past used what they had, they used what worked, and they used all the things. They would work with Satan and also Jesus and the Mother Mary and the Holy Trinity. They would use any of it. And one of the things that I remember reading that helped me understand it was sometimes people would call upon the devil to remove illness because illness was evil, so only an evil force could actually remove that evil force. So it wasn't like they were Satan worshipers. No, they considered themselves good Christians, but they still called upon dark powers to remove dark energy.
Really?
So that's why they were... So in this example with the cursing, you call upon the devil to do something evil because he's evil, right? Makes sense. So it's just fascinating, though.
And then you got the hierarchies and all that stuff, too, involved there, I think.
The what?
The hierarchies of the devils and demons and stuff,
yeah.
if you really look into it. Like, it's pretty extensive stuff. And I've said this before, there's a lot of people out there that curse, and to your point about people saying they would never do things, you hear a lot of people say that about money, right? Well, if these rich people, they're running the world, they're doing all these different things. But most of the people that you hear say these things have never had their hands on that kind of money. They don't know what they would do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
They can't. They don't.
We never know what we would do. It's so easy to judge other people, but it's not. It's not really that useful, actually.
Yeah, but, for sure.
So
I got a question here in the Fringe FM chat from Mojo. Says, can you ask Corinne how to correctly sage your house? I think a lot of people talk about that, though, right? There's everybody's using sage to sage their house.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of a taboo. It's politically incorrect now. So let's say, but yes, so smudge. Let's say smudge our house,
right?
Because maybe you have a different smudge. Maybe you use cedar, or maybe you use juniper, depending on your locale. Out here, it's western red cedar is a good one, and in some parts it's the Artemisia tridentata, so the desert sage. So anyway, yeah, if you want to do some sort of house cleansing, I like to do it on the eve before a full moon is a nice time if you're going to do like a monthly one, or you could definitely do it on the high nights, like we talked about earlier, the 4 nights.
Mm-hmm.
But what I like to do, I mean, I do various things at various points of the year, but if you're just going to do fumigation, so smudge, so you can have your bowl of like ashes, so to catch the smudge, or you can use salt. So you need some sort of metal bowl with your ashes or your salt, and then, you know, you light it. And I like to, you know, have total silence. I don't have music. I don't, you know, nobody's around, and I say prayers. That's how I do it. I speak to the spirits of the house as I do any kind of fumigation. I walk room to room, and I like to go, like, I like to blow the smoke a little or hold the smoke above each threshold of the doors and windows. So that's how I do it, where I walk into a room, I raise it up, and then I go to the window, raise it up, and then I also look at all four of the corners of the room as I'm doing it, speaking prayers to the house spirit for protection or whatever. And it can just be, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect. You know, it's not like, it's like you're mumbling kind of like,
sure,
you know, blah, blah, blah. And then you do that for each room, and kind of, ideally, you kind of go in a circle of some sort, like, depending on how the house is set up. But, you know, you go from one end to another and kind of cover all the areas.
Sweeping the floor, maybe, pushing it all out to a certain point.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
See, that's what I've been told. Two things. One is people forget to, like this one guy was telling me, they forget to go in closets and corners, and because certain spirits like to hide in dark and dirty places, right? And so he was talking about how you kind of push it all, open up everything, but push it all out into one place, you know. But you brought up a good point about the native stuff, and I've been told this too. Like, some people use sage, some people use frankincense. So like in our area really in the United States, what would be better for us to use if we're in the U.S., or does it matter?
Oh, well, it depends on where you are in the U.S. I have, you know, like I'm by Western Red Cedar, but 2 hours from here over the mountains, it's desert sages everywhere, the Artemisia tridentata. So that's really widely available. You know, it varies. It's going to be some sort of aromatic that was like used as a fumigant, probably historically. So juniper is one, definitely down south.
So you look into the history of the
kind
area.
of. That's what I would do. If you plopped me down onto your land in the Ozarks, which I've never been there. If I was in Arkansas, I would just look for like an aromatic conifer. Personally, like I'd look for some sort of evergreen tree that was fragrant, not a yew tree. You don't want to burn that; those are toxic. But I'd try to find some sort of fragrant fir, probably not a pine because I feel like they're a little smoky, but a fir, like a true Abies or a juniper, and I would just use that.
You know what you should do?
I don't have to know the plant's name.
You probably don't want to, and you probably don't have time to, but you're so well versed in this. A lot of people they like to buy just packages from people. I remember doing that too, from like Lucky Mojo and stuff, you know. Like, I don't know about all these correspondences and history and ancestors. I just trust this person.
Right.
You know what I mean? Have you ever done that before?
Sure. Yeah, well, of course, yeah.
A lot of time and effort.
And I still do with certain things that I can't get. I can't grow frankincense, and I like it, you know.
Sure, yeah. Here's one for you that I don't know what you could think about, but here, like this morning, actually it was this afternoon when I woke up, I walked outside and I was just overwhelmed with the smell of honeysuckle, and I love honeysuckle. It's like my favorite thing to smell. There's something good about that. So is it bad? And this is a good question. I got a text in. Is it bad if we pull that from the trees when it's blooming? Do the spirits get offended, or how does that even work? Or does that even matter?
Well, I would say, like when it's taken over and you want to pull it, is it bad when it's blooming? I mean, you could use the flowers for what I would do if I was in that scenario and needed to pull it, because I know how invasive that European honeysuckle can be. It is kind of intense, but I would talk to the plant, tell the plant what you're doing, and prune it back a little bit, and then use some of the flowers in medicine. You can make a really good elixir, actually, with just the flowers, no leaf, no green, no stem. If you take them and wilt them just a little bit, and you put them in brandy and honey, you can make this divine elixir. It's so good, and you can use it for cold and flus, just a small amount, you know, like a dropper full 3 times a day or something, not very much. It was used in Chinese medicine and in parts of France and different parts for that, coughs and colds, but you don't need much. It's really fragrant. But anyway, so yeah, that's kind of what I would do, is tell the plant what I'm doing. I would make an offering and say, I'm sorry, you know, I'm gonna cut you back, and you're still gonna be here. You're gonna thrive. but I have to cut you back. I mean, you just talk to them and make an offering of whatever you think they want. What do you think? Maybe a little bit of honey?
Mm-hmm. You know, I've noticed something about magic.
What?
Is that it's something that you want to make sure you're alone if you're worried about what other people think. Because the more I read about like ritual and all this stuff, if you were in society, people are like, man, are you talking to that plant? Man, what are you doing? You know?
Yeah.
So it's like a one-on-one thing most of the time. But you were talking about groups earlier too, so there's power in that as well, I think.
Yeah, when people are in the same mind frame, you know, I sometimes have to be. It's kind of funny. I don't care anymore at this point if people see me doing whatever with plants. I just don't care. So if I'm out, there's an example. I was obsessed with the black maple trees. These black leaved maple trees. There's some ornamental, right? Not a native plant. I don't know anything about their folklore. In truth, the Acer genus doesn't have a lot of magical lore. I wrote about it in my book. They have a lot of material uses and not very much magic or medicine, which is surprising, but that's a maple genus. So, but anyway, I'm obsessed with these black maple leaves, just obsessed. So there's a big tree outside of my dentist's office, and I would just go and pick them and talk to them and like, whatever, I don't care. So it's like, if you care, but if you don't care, like what's people usually are just, and people honestly are just curious. They a lot of times will say, what are you doing? And then you tell them, and then they're like, oh, that's super cool. I've never had a bad response. Like nobody's ever been like, that's stupid. Like never, you know.
There's some crazy lady over there talking to the plants. They never have guts enough to say it to your face, though. They won't. Right? That's the funny part
some people
about it.
Definitely won't. I couldn't care less about them.
How do you feel about being drawn to keeping psychoactive plants around? I mean, not to use them, but things like opium poppy and cannabis, stuff like. Some people just like those plants. Is it good or bad to keep them just around?
Well, it just depends on the person and what's happening with the plant and the relationship. We can't say it's really good or bad. I love opium poppies. I grow them, but I don't use it. I'm not a big substance user at all. And so, but I really love the plant. I feel like I get so much from that plant. It is so incredible. And it's really an ally with those who are passing over and going through stages of dying. So anyway, I couldn't be without that plant, but yet I never use it physically for anything more than like a compress. Like I would, if I had pain, knock on wood, I would boil the opium pods and leaves and do like a compress, you know, like with a cloth, but I wouldn't take it internally, I don't think. I don't do well with pharmaceuticals or any kind of drugs in general. Make me feel bad. So is it bad to have them around? I love toxic plants. I've been fascinated by toxic plants for my, my whole experience with plants, foxglove and monkshood and datura and belladonna and, mandrake and all of these. I don't use them internally, but I know people that mess with that, but I don't. So, no, I think it's good to always have any plants around that you can have. It's never bad unless you are abusing them and you have a problem with them or something.
Do you receive this is from another text in a 602 area code. Do you receive certain signals from plants? Like do you believe we can use our own energetic force to heal plants?
I feel like I receive signals in terms of what that looks like to me is, if I will start seeing a plant a bunch, all of a sudden I'll be dreaming about it, not a bunch, but like a couple dreams where I'll have flashes of it in my dream. I'll start noticing it. I'll like have visions where it pops in my head and maybe right before falling asleep, or maybe I'm driving and I don't see it, but I think of it. And then, I just have weird threads with that when I know that it's important for me to pay attention. So I do, that's kind of the signals I get, is more just like noticing and then like repeat noticing and repeat like contact in some way. And then do I think we can heal plants? Sure. I think they would respond to us. I guess if there was I wonder about the context of the question. Is it like, if you came across a house plant that was like totally trashed and somebody's garbage, could you bring it back to life with your, obviously, It needs water and sunlight and stuff.
Well, you know, some people are like, oh, I can feel the energy coming off of this, and I've never felt I've felt energy before, but I never, when people talk about that, I'm like, I don't feel nothing. Sorry, I don't feel anything.
But most of us have to be trained because we're totally numb, because we're in a culture that doesn't believe in any of this stuff. So we have to like thaw out, you know. So it's just, I bet if you were trained to feel it, you would feel it. You would start feeling it. If you were trained to use those parts of your, you know, whatever, brain or DNA or whatever, you would feel it. It's just a matter of experience. Once you started having reference points and feeling the experience of like, oh, okay, what is an O? So say we go on a walk and I put a blindfold on you and you don't know where we are exactly, and I like lead you to an oak tree and stand you in front of it. You can't touch it. You can't whatever, smell it or see it, but you feel something, and then I bring you to the pine tree, and we do that a couple times, and you'll pick up on subtleties. You just need the time and experience to do it, you know? I believe
understand.
It, for sure.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of practice.
It does.
For sure.
It's
Look,
like a
guys,
muscle.
we're already halfway through the broadcast. If you want to go to the website, make sure you go to maplemistwood.com. We'll be right back with Corinne Boyer.
To Lighting the Void Radio.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
If you are interested in occult subjects, psychic abilities, symbols, tarot, witchcraft, magic, or anything similarly related, my book Occult Arcana will provide you with a truly objective overview of these topics and more. Written in anything but modern language, Occult Arcana was compiled to help researchers balance their quest for a better understanding of the meanings of and in such studies. Occult Arcana is available in softcover and digital form from www.thesecretteachings.info. All copies can also be autographed if requested. That's Occult Arcana from www.thesecretteachings.info.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Greetings, galactic community. This is Suzanne Ross, host of Sci-Spy Radio, every Wednesday evening from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific. Join me for this brand new show featuring a revolutionary new genre, Sci-Spy, merging science and spirituality to give us answers to the greatest mysteries of creation. Together, scientific scientific discovery and spiritual revelation reveal the truth about who we are, where we came from, why we're here, and where we're going. Tune in to Sci-Spy Radio every Wednesday from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific and discover the truth for yourself at thefringe.fm.
This is Paranormal News. I'm John Jeter. Are those footprints of Yeti? The Indian Army claims it is so. They tweeted a picture of prints found by a mountaineering expedition team at a base camp in Nepal that measured nearly 3 feet long and 15 inches wide. The evidence was handed over for scientific evaluation. The Army says it matches earlier theories of the abdominal snowman. Yeti reportedly dwells in the Himalayas. Nepalese folklore describes the creature as furry and ape-like with a terrifying howl. In the 1950s, British explorer Eric Shipton claimed to have discovered abnormal footprints, and the government issued him a license to hunt it.
It was late in the afternoon on November the 8th, 1951, and Shipton and the expedition's doctor, Michael Ward, were working on a glacier a couple of miles from here. And then suddenly they came across a set of huge footprints that went away from them down the glacier, and it left them completely mystified.
Despite sensationalized claims of his existence over the decades, Yeti is still largely unfounded. Connect with the news at ParanormalRadio.com. I'm John Jeter, and this is Paranormal News.
Hi, this is Aaron Hunter, host of Real Paranormal Activity, the podcast where we tell real paranormal experiences of people from around the world. And we also conduct interviews with authors, investigators, psychics, and mediums. Real people, real stories, real fear. Thursdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on The Fringe FM. See you then.
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. Don't forget, after the broadcast tonight, The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable will be on. That's also 5 nights a week, starting at midnight Pacific. So we do this, man. 5 nights a week. You stay up late with us right here on the Fringe FM with the late night crowd. I don't even myself. I really don't even go to bed till 6 or 7 in the morning most of the time. So I have my own coffin and everything. Anyways, we're here with Corinne Boyer, and author of Plants with the Devil and Under the Witching Tree, which is a trilogy. So Plants with the Devil is separate from the trilogy of Under the Witching Tree, correct?
Correct.
I just want to make clear about that.
Yeah, it's confusing sometimes to people. Yeah, it's separate.
I'll tell you what else is confusing, and we've brought it up quite a bit on this broadcast, and I'd love to talk to you about it. It's not exactly plant related, but this whole idea of the devil and Lucifer. When you look into that mythology and the folklore of the devil, I honestly think it's kind of misunderstood, because the more I look into it, it's just confusing, right? So people are like, look, it's just easier to call the devil and Satan the bad guy. Lucifer is just bad, evil, bad, right?
Right.
But if you look into all of the text, this one says he's just a trickster, and this one's kind of different. So yeah, I get perplexed about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. It's one of the reasons I like to use the term the wild adversary. It really works because it's not just so like specifically like, oh, evil or demonizing this energy, but it is kind of the way that I think about when I think about the devil, with writing the book that I wrote and having different experiences and dreams and different things. But I think of the devil proper as, very misunderstood, but a very old, very masculine force that's not human. So that's the thing, too, is that you notice over time, like, it's interesting how it's almost like humans will put human attributes on something that is other, that isn't human, and it for whatever reason, because that's the only way they can relate to it. So I think it's kind of an insult to the integrity of the spirit force to be so like trivialized and minimized by human attributes, if that makes sense. But the wild adversary, in my experience, is a really old supernatural force, so not human dead. And when any kind of energy is really old, and I guess like how you're going to experience that, how I'm going to experience that, how so-and-so is going to experience that, it's going to maybe look and feel different. And we have a lot of course, judgments and, taboo and fear around that particular figure. But I guess I feel like, talking about transgressive magic, there's something that is like very archetypal. Everything carries archetypal energy. That's what I always like to say to my students. And so there's a lot of energy in everything from, the bone of a fox to, an oak tree and to the spirit of the devil. So we have archetypal energy in different concentrations and all of these things and like forces. And so with the wild adversary, with any kind of spirit that's been around, or spirit energy, because it's not a singular spirit in my experience. It's not like one spirit that looks a certain way to everybody and is the same to everybody. Not at all. It's bigger than that. What I like to think of it is like an aggregate. So when I took botany a long time ago, there's one of the terms for the fruit is aggregate fruit. So like a strawberry with a lot of seeds is aggregate, or raspberry. So it's like the same thing where it's like the energy of that spirit force is kind of like makes up an aggregate. And also what's true is that the human energy that goes into interacting with that spirit force builds and builds and builds power as well. So any of these, like, that's why like gods and goddesses and any of these deities that are really old and that have been worshipped and or interacted with for a very long time, there's human energy around these things too. So that's why it's confusing. So I feel like, but at the end of the day, what I will say in my experiences or whatever, and practical and personal and research, all of it, I feel like the wild adversary is dangerous. Indeed is dangerous, which means like any supernatural spirit, they're all dangerous. Like fairy spirits are very dangerous to humans. And the way that I view that, the wild adversary is like, king of the fairies, I guess. I mean, it's just like, those words don't do it justice, and it like conjures up something that's not exactly what I'm trying to articulate, but I guess it's true.
That's kind of like, if fire burns you, you can use it as a weapon or you can use it but you got to respect it at the same time because it's dangerous.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I get that.
It is dangerous. Right.
There's a different part, though, I think, that people want to know and they just won't admit it. They won't admit it.
Right.
But I'll say it for them. Okay, so there's a thing in the text that talks about asking Lucifer for help, right? And I've talked to, now I'm perplexed about this too, and I'm sure Jeff and he'll probably scold me for saying this, but Jeff is a guy that comes on the program a couple of times a month. But anyways, there's a thing where people worry about if they're going to burn in hell or lose their salvation or get some type of repercussions that they cannot have control over after they ask help from something dark. And I think that's what scares people. It's not, and I really don't think it's about, I don't want to mess with evil stuff. I think most people would if they knew for a fact that most of it was just BS, like as far as what's going to happen to them,
Right. If they didn't have any repercussions, then maybe they would.
I mean, sure. Like, come on. If somebody said, "Hey, there's this ritual you can do where you invoke Lucifer, and he's the dark guy, but you just give him a few gifts, make sure you respect him, and your life's going to change." The big question goes, that
Everybody
sounds
would do it.
great, but am I going to burn in hell? Am I going to lose is someone going to die? What's going to happen here? Right. So I think that's what people worry about mainly.
Right. No, I think you're right. That's a really good point. Mm-hmm.
So what do you think?
Well, I think that I wrote in my book, anybody that goes out and tries to like conjure the devil is not going to get the devil. They're not. They're going to get something else. It's not the devil proper, because the wild adversary is much more cunning and clever than that, and doesn't just show up when you summon him. He just doesn't. You get some sort of dark force or some sort of like fragmentary thing, but it's not the same thing, and that's even more dangerous, I think, because it's like we have this, I don't know, we have this assumption that if we conjure up a supernatural spirit, maybe it's like, yeah, I mean, I just did a workshop in Portland a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about Hecate. Maybe if we conjure up Hecate, or, you know, or hell, or these supernatural spirits, we think that we're going to get that. We're not. Like, that is such an egotistical assumption. If we conjure up our grandmother of the human dead, we're going to get her, but we're not going to get that supernatural spirit that we're trying to work with that easily. It's not that easy. So I think that that's part of it, is that, and it shouldn't be, and it's good that it's not, but it's like...
It's not like the devil's Santa Claus, where it just shows up to everybody's house on Christmas Eve, right? No problem. I'll be there in a minute. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. I'll drop everything and show up at your crossroads for you.
Yeah.
No, it really does feel like that there's a relationship, and there's also one of the things that I say a lot in my classes with spirit power, whether it's an animal or a plant or a human dead or a supernatural spirit, is they will come to you, and they come to you repeatedly. Like, when we don't, it's like the spirit animal thing, this whole idea that, like, what's your spirit animal? Like, we get to choose. We don't get to choose. The spirit animal, or whatever, I don't even like that term because it feels like not right. But, you know, the animal chooses us. So that means, like, with me, for example, it's like, oh, okay, so, yeah, I have dreams about snakes. I see snakes. I find snake materia magic. I find dead snakes in the road. Blah, 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 this, whatever. I have these interactions. Oh, somebody starts talking about it. I'm just using that as an example, but that is an animal I work with a lot. But it's like, it has to come to me. I don't get to go out and say,
I've been taught that. Like,
bam.
Yeah, so I've been taught in a way that if I go outside...
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is what I was taught about listening to nature. I don't want to sound silly, but I've been taught, like, in the real world, and this is type of a Carl Jungian type of thing, if I go outside and I see a poisonous snake in the grass, right, that I shouldn't ignore that. I possibly do have a snake in the grass in my life somewhere, and maybe Spirit's
like
trying to tell me that.
It's a sign. Totally. It's an omen. It's a sign. All of the omens and signs and auguries that we get in a day-to-day experience, we should pay attention to, I think. I pay attention to all of them. And we have to make meaning from it.
You think that's why we can't speak scientific and intellectual truth about this? Because it's from our own personal experience, and after a million coincidences, you think, okay, this is not a coincidence anymore. I think that's why it's so hard to talk about.
For sure. Yeah, it's hard to quantify, basically, or qualify, like supernatural experience and or mystical experience. And it's because it's not supposed to be. We're not supposed to be able to quantify or qualify it. It's not that kind of thinking. We have to remember that scientific thinking, the decline in magic in our Western culture is not from religion. Religion and magic existed hand in hand for over 1,000 years in terms of westernized world. In Christianity, they were together, interwoven completely. What caused the decline in magic is scientific thinking. So public health and scientific thinking and public education is what caused, like, the decline in magical thinking. So, like, the enchanted worldview 150 years ago that my ancestors in the British Isles had, the way that they thought about, like what you're saying, coming outside and seeing a poisonous snake in the grass and, like, being like, oh, that was a sign, And now, where we don't even have that, we have the instinct to do that still because it's not that far away, but it's totally right under the surface, and it's all about making meaning and finding those things. And so, how can we talk about it in a scientific way if that's, like, the way in and of itself that it nullifies that experience, right?
Yeah, and I can tell you for a fact that I didn't just make that up. That happened, and I did have a snake in the grass, a pretty big one. Actually,
and it was a sign.
Yeah, it was a definite sign, and it was almost like a confirmation to where I kind of knew it, And I did this thing where it's like, look, tell me if I'm right about this, and I swear it was the next day You know,
Wow.
you walk out and you see a
Yeah.
snake in the grass, and it's like, there it is, right?
Yep.
It's there. Now I just got to identify the thing, you know, so.
And then you did.
Yep, sure did.
Good.
But it's
like what
most
comes
people
in
call that a
dreams, too.
coincidence, though, don't they?
Right. Well, that's an easy way for people just to be like, that doesn't mean anything. But of course, if it happened to them, they would make meaning from it. We all do. Everybody does, like even in their own way. I remember reading one time, this woman, it was in a anthology of witchcraft and sorcery. This woman wrote a great article, but I don't remember her name, but she said something like, I don't believe in magic. You know, we're in a society that doesn't believe in magic. But so if 13 people wrote letters about cursing me, I wouldn't even bat an eye. And I thought about that for a while. Then I thought, you know what? That's probably true until her car broke down, her boyfriend dumped her, her cat got hit. You know, like all those. If those things happened, then she'd be super worried. She would She would totally know that that's why. Of course, like we know. You know. So
you're so right about that. Because.
Yeah.
Even when I've doubted that, and I've had friends that have doubted it, when their string of bad luck gets to a certain point, they're like, okay, something's going on. And you're like, well, wait a minute, buddy. I thought you didn't believe in that stuff. This is just weird. Yeah, well, there it is. Something you said earlier
right on the surface
really just kind of bothers me, and not because you said it, but you were talking about generational curses. So people can really curse your family through generations. Think about that. That's
right.
That's pretty scary.
We have to think. Yeah, it's scary, but we have to assume that they're a powerful practitioner. So not everybody's going to be. So just because somebody does a curse doesn't mean there's a lot of power behind it. So let's assume that 85% of people, they may have some power and that may have some effect, I guess. But like who's really going to have the power to actually make that happen? Not very many people. So don't be too scared.
Okay, good. Because I was like, I think that might have happened to me. When you look at, especially if you go to Ancestry.com and you look at, okay, everybody's like, oh, in a past life, I was a knight and we come from a royal family. And you look at yours and you're like, well, yeah, well, we've been farmers for thousands of years and pretty poor.
That's awesome.
You know, we're not anybody special. I wonder if we have some type of generational curse, you know? So I think about those things sometimes.
Well, there is ways to detect if somebody has a family curse. If you have somebody who's sensitive and can pick up on it, for sure. It's rare. And I'm from all farmers. That's all I'm from, and that's what most of us are from. So
yeah,
nothing wrong about that.
Yeah, like people like, I'm Edgar Casey, or I was this guy in a past life, and thinking, well, I guess I was the guy at the stable shoveling horse manure. That's okay. Everybody's got to be somebody special,
Yeah, totally.
Here's something I want to touch on. Animism is something I'm learning about now, trying to understand, because I was brought up to believe that only human beings have spirits, and maybe animals. That's a question everybody gets into in a conversation. Everybody gets into. I think they do. But the idea of animism, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that everything alive, even rocks per se, have some type of spirit behind them. Do you subscribe to that?
Right. Yeah, for sure. That there's spirit power. We spirit in and of itself is like a little bit too specific. It makes us feel like that there's like a personality with everything. But when we generalize it a little bit more to spirit power instead of to spirit, I do think it's absolutely true. And of course, not everything's created equal. And some things don't have any spirit power. So I don't think every single thing on the planet, like the mirror, over. So the mirror that's hanging above my daughter's bed that like came from, some craft store that she wanted or whatever. Do I think that has much spirit power? Not very much compared to the mirror that I have from my ancestors that's like old and has been through many, many hands. Like the difference between those two things, you can feel it. But yeah, I think most everything has some sort of spirit, energy, or power. It's just a scale. It's just a matter of scale and spectrum, I
want to tell you about a story, and tell me, does age give stuff power? For example, there's this 2000. I mean, they've dated it down to 2,624-year-old tree that was discovered in North Carolina in a swamp, and it's one of the oldest on the earth. Yeah. and they identified a group of ancient bald cypress trees, which are over 2,000 years old in the wetlands of North Carolina's Black River.
Cool.
But does that tree or those set of trees or that specific one that they dated, which is 2,624 years old, it's creepy looking too, right? But
I bet.
Does that thing hold more power, do you think, than other trees out there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I do think that, especially when we're talking about, it's interesting when we're talking about something that's still alive, right? So I wouldn't necessarily say that anything that's super old is like as powerful or more powerful than something else, like if we're talking about inanimate object or something necessarily, but with a tree that's still alive, I do think that's true, because it's still alive, and look at what it's seen, all the things that it's seen, and all the changes that feels. And you would feel that next to that tree versus a 100-year-old one of the same species. So even though they're the same genus, species, or variety or whatever, you'd feel the difference because of that power and the age. Absolutely. And most likely, if a tree is that old, I mean, what other spirits are hanging around it that's not even just the tree spirit itself or whatever?
Like fairies?
Yeah, or like human dead. Was anybody ever executed on that tree? Who knows? Like, I mean, or buried in a sky burial or whatever. I don't know. But it's just interesting to think about all the activity around it.
So, like, if you was going to go into that swamp or whatever, and you wanted to get something super powerful, that would be your target, right? Or would it be too dangerous to mess with it because you just don't know because it's got so much history?
Right. I wouldn't touch that tree.
You wouldn't? Okay.
Personally.
That makes sense.
No. I'd like to go see it though, but I would not harvest one branch from it.
Yeah.
That's just the feeling I get thinking about it, but yeah. No, that's like sacred material. That's how I see it.
Have you ever had go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, have you ever heard of the lone thorns? So the hawthorn trees, the Crataegus trees that are on the British Isles, specifically in Ireland, where there's a really strong fairy mythology still with the elderly folks especially, but where I've never been there, so I can't talk from firsthand experience, but I've read about it, where there's these lone hawthorn trees that weren't planted by the hand of humans and that are not part of the hedgerows that keep out the animals and whatnot, and they're not part of the garden, but they're kind of just like these wild, really old, twisted, distorted trees that that most of them are half dead or whatever, struck by lightning, blah, 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 but they're sacred trees, and they're thought to belong to the fairies and the natural spirits there, and nobody, it's very taboo to harvest anything, even a fallen branch from them. You don't touch their berries or their, the haws or the flowers or anything. But you make offerings or maybe go make a prayer or do a folk ritual, but you wouldn't harvest any. Otherwise, your house would burn down or you'd get a broken arm or something.
Ooh.
So it's kind of like that.
Yeah, don't want that to happen, right?
No, don't.
Okay, here it is, because people want to know. Have you ever had any paranormal experiences or encounters with spirits, per se, where you could visually see, hear them, or know that they were there from your own physical senses?
Yeah.
You
but
have,
the thing, but here's the thing. I was trained. That's one of the things that my teacher Johannes and I really worked on. So I was trained by my teacher Joyce Nedishin about 12 years ago to go into trance and be able to see and interact with spirits in a trance-like state. So that's kind of how I learned. And when I was a kid, I could definitely perceive spirit energy, but I didn't see like a ghost. I never saw ghosts when I was a kid, not like in the movies or something, but I could feel different things. But what I learned was through going through different people, different teachers that taught me what they have experienced and having like trance experience with spirit interaction and then waking life with open eyes and seeing energy, is that what I learned is that we make a lot of assumptions about what it should feel or look like or seem like. So because of movies, we think if we see a ghost, it needs to be a white figure walking across the floor and have, whatever, like the movies, right? But that's not how it is. It's like a different kind of sense where you can, I've had, like there have been times I remember in my early 20s where, and this is before any of this training happened, where I'd be sitting in a room and all of a sudden, like, I could see energy on things or people in a crazy way where they would just turn colors, and I would see like glowing, like kind of like auras, which I thought was really cheesy, or something. I was like, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't understand it. It's almost like I didn't have a context or parameters or framework for understanding it. So that makes a big difference, is like knowing kind of what to look for and what things feel like. For me, for example, if I start thinking about the dead, the human dead, and I do spend some time in graveyards and cemeteries doing different things and making offerings or whatever, and just, I always loved them.
You spend time in cemeteries by yourself?
Yeah.
And it doesn't bother you?
Definitely.
It doesn't freak you out?
No, I love it.
Why the
I always
cemetery?
loved it since I was a kid. I think I'm drawn to places where the human dead are. It's just kind of a natural thing, actually, not an unnatural thing. It's where it feels sacred, and it feels like a liminal place. It's a place of power, and I'm always just fascinated by that energy. I've always been drawn to it since I was a kid. But when I think about those places, or when I'm there, a lot of times I'll start to see fog, like silver fog, not silver, but white haze. And then I know now that that's the veil of the dead, and it makes it almost a little bit easier to talk and speak with them. But I know what to look for. It's like, it's not like the movies. I kind of feel like because of our culture and we don't have a container for it, you have to have some training. Unless you're just full-blown, like, second sight, you can see and talk to the dead. Like some people say they can all the time, all day long. I question that. I'm not saying I disbelieve them, but I think that there's sometimes when people say that, I get a sense of like, I don't know how sincere they really are, and sometimes there are people that I absolutely believe 100%. It just depends on the person. But people that claim to see them, and it's like Hollywood style kind of a thing. I don't know. Maybe
it doesn't add up, right? Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, that's it.
That's been my experience too with everything as far as paranormal and spirituality stuff goes, because it doesn't add up. Even especially this whole ascension thing, I question sometimes, because it's all about positive energy and love, light, and rainbows and stuff, and you think, well,
yeah.
From my experience, and Miguel Connor and I had to talk about this, but there is definitely that side of things. But we live in a polar world and universe. You could definitely focus on one side of things, but you're denying half the reality if you do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and how are you really going to understand one extreme if you don't even have any sense of the other, or even think it's important in any way?
It's kind of like this. Like, I think there's this narrative going on right now to ignore the suffering of things because you don't like the way it makes you feel.
Absolutely,
how would you feel if you were the one suffering and you lived in a world where people ignored you because you make them feel bad because you're suffering? That's not pretty. That's not very cool, is it? And you know what? No. We live in that world, actually. People are doing that.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true.
So what is one of the one things that people do, because you're in tune with the plants and this is your thing. What is the one thing that people do that really get on your nerves? Please don't say mow the lawn, because I mow the grass like once a week.
I wasn't going to say that. I'll tell you. I will tell you. I know right off the top of my head. I guess it's like there are certain groups of people who consider themselves plant people that are like in the gardening community that vehemently hate invasive plants and will willingly spray tons of poison on the earth to get rid of them and just despise invasive plants, but they proclaim to be plant lovers. That bothers me because it's exactly what you were just saying. It's like, well, if we want roses and, viola and whatever, daffodils, then it's fine. But if it's Scotch broom and English ivy and dandelion, then it's not fine. So there's like a judgment thing that comes into play. And there's a really cool book called Invasive Plant Medicine that's really awesome. But it's basically like this, like we have some sort of assumption that like plants don't have intelligence, but they do. So, for example, Scotch broom, which is really considered invasive out here, Cytisus scoparius, it's in bloom right now. all over. It's in the legume family, and it's all along the roadsides and like highways and stuff. And people absolutely hate this plant. And it's true that it invades the prairies. But if we were doing controlled burning practices like the Native American folks did hundreds of years ago to keep their prairies open, we wouldn't have any problems, but we're not allowed to do that. And then that shows up in places where backhoes and bulldozers have been. So it's actually a nitrogen fixer. So it has these nitrogen, whatever, nodules that helps fix nitrogen in the soil. And so it's actually an earth healer. And if you see what happens, the Scotch broom will show up after like a land's been cleared, and then trees will eventually get tall enough again and crowd it out, and it'll die. So it has its own like intelligence and its own cycle. But these proclaimed plant lovers just hate it. So anyway, it kind of bothers me when people say they're a plant person and they hate plants, certain plants. I love all the plants, even if I don't want. There's a few plants I don't like in my garden.
Like weeds?
Canadian thistle. Yeah, like Canadian thistle and bindweed I don't like in my garden. But you know what? When they bloom on the sides of the road, I love them. They're so beautiful, and I still appreciate them.
I used to tell my grandmother that. She was, come outside and help me pull weeds, right, when I was a kid. And she'd go out there and just physically pull the weeds out by the roots. And, when you got done doing all that, your back was hurting. And I told her, I said, why don't you just be nice to the weeds for once and let them grow? They're going to come back and get you one of these days. And
that's right.
I did find it funny that there's a lot of people that go hunting out here in Arkansas, and they buy all this land, and that's what they do. They buy land from the forest industries and stuff, and then they cut whatever they want to cut and chop whatever they want to chop, and you'll see it happen. There's always some type of freak accident that happens to them. Or,
oh, really?
Yeah, they got stabbed by a certain thorn, or they hit this branch and they fell out of the deer stand. I'm like, well, maybe, if you didn't cut down half the trees and make all your little deer trails with your machete all the time so you can kill the deer, but you already have tons of meat in your refrigerator, right? But I get it.
Totally.
So
there's something about balance that's real.
That's not manly, though, of me to have feelings for plants, though, is it? I think.
No, not at all. That's not, but
I don't want to lose my masculinity. Just the weeds. I'll get rid of weeds. You got to be
careful.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But I'm glad we had this discussion because I'm starting to learn about animism a little bit more. I know like people like Rudolf Steiner were really into talking about these things and how all these things on this planet come into development, and talks about the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, as if consciousness is kind of going through these stages. And man, that's kind of hard for me to believe, but it's kind of cool too, that maybe I was a rock at some point in my past and turned into a plant, then an animal, and now I'm here as a human. Do you buy into that?
Who knows? The whole, I kind of think that whatever maybe is before or after, we just can't even fathom, so why bother? I kind of feel like that, but I don't know. Like reincarnation and all the things. There's something to it for sure, but I don't pretend to know that I have it figured out or that I really can know what to count on,
Right. Well, listen, I want to make sure everybody knows how to find your book. It's at maplemistwood.com. Where else can they get it to? Just all the places they can grab the book. The books.
My book? Oh, well, yeah, no, just directly from Troy Books is really good. And then the Amazon has Plants of the Devil if you're interested in that one. And those are, and I'm also doing a couple conferences this summer. So one of the ones that I like both of them, but the upcoming one in mid-July is called the Veridis Genii Symposium, and that is a conference that's located in Western Washington, but it's a plant magic conference. There's nothing like it in the world. This is the 5th year, and I'm really blessed to be presenting for the 3rd time. And so I'm going to be talking about plants in the second sight, actually. So plants that help enhance the power of seeing into the beyond, kind of into the veil. So that's my topic, and all the presenters are spectacular, and it's a wonderful venue. If you're a person who's really into that, check out the Veridis Genii Symposium. And then and then the other conference is the Texan Traditions Conference in Seattle in September. So it's like a esoteric book fair basically, and there's incredible presentations also, and I'll be talking about the lore of serpents and dragons, plant lore of serpents and dragons in that one. So I'm excited. So yeah, there's a couple conferences, and then book stuff. So
listen, this was.
And if any,
go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, if anybody has questions about classes, just feel free to email me through my website. So yeah,
maplemistwood.com, and it was a very awesome time talking to you. It was a blast. I had a pleasure. We can do it again sometime. Maybe when I figure this out a little bit more and read some of your books, because I got to get into this and learn this. I mean, I'm from the natural state. Come on, I don't even know half the trees you were trying to ask me about. I feel dumb.
No, it's been really great conversation, Joe, and really fun. And you should let me know if you have any questions too, anytime.
Absolutely. So, thanks for coming on the program. I really appreciate it, Corinne.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me and thinking of me.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem. We'll be right back, guys. Don't go anywhere. We got a little bit more coming up. We're going to bring on a resident scientist to talk a little bit more about this and kind of talk about the week 2, what we got coming up on the network. Stay with us.
This is Elle. I listen to Lighting the Void because it's interactive radio with good content, interesting guests, and a humble host, sharing his journey through the esoteric. Hey, Joe Roop. Thanks for having us along for the ride.
Thank you so much. What a delightful evening.
Well, I got a lot of ground to cover.
All right, everyone, this is Justin from the UK. Excuse the chitty. If you're into the Fringe and you want to hear the brass tacks, me old China plate, Joe Roop and his guests on Lighting the Void will open your mince pies. You need to shut your north and south and use your 10-speed gears and listen to them bubble. You could hear a Barry Crocker, no Brussels, but he ain't no holy friar. Anyway, you be the Barnaby Rudge and take a butcher's.
Ahoy there, Gigi here from Shift Happens. Do you like to boogie down to topics such as ufology, the occult, and the mysteries behind our reality? Well, I invite you to join us every Friday night at 7 p.m. Pacific, that's 10 p.m. Eastern, as we like to punch that curiosity button and tickle that fancy. We tickle that fancy, but yeah, I don't know if that's the right analogy, but there's certainly a lot of tickling going on over here at Shift Happens.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM.
Introducing Shadow Light Tarot from Waking Canvas, the Fringe FM's new contributing artist Eric Tesey. This hand-illustrated black and white self-published deck serves as a reinvention of the tarot never before witnessed. Each of the several suits of this 88-card deck lineup form an infinite panoramic scene. Even the included visual companion guidebook is entirely hand-illustrated, cover to cover, with beautiful visuals and esoteric symbols and artwork. The newly released deck comes in a custom magnetic box with its own travel pouch. The Shadow Light Tarot Premium Deck and its travel-sized mini deck Wonder Light Tarot are both available now from WakingCanvas.com. If you use the code word FRINGE, that's FRINGE at checkout, you'll receive an extra 10% off your entire order. To discover more, including a free reading and time lapses of all the illustrated artwork, make your way over to WakingCanvas.com today. That's WakingCanvas.com. We all have that story to tell in our lives. The winds were howling, the ground shook, you could hear rushing water, and then history repeats itself. When there's no power, refrigeration fails, stores with their shelves stripped bare, ATMs can't operate, deliveries stop. Then what? These events can last days or weeks. You need a plan. In statements made during recent interviews, FEMA Administrator Brock Long has repeatedly urged all Americans to understand three truths. FEMA is broke, the system is broken. If this is the new normal, Americans can't rely on federal cavalry when disaster strikes. Don't get caught out in the elements empty-handed. Prepare with us by going to preparewiththefringe.com and get your 2-week food supply. 92 servings, 8 food varieties with 25-year shelf life. Normally $137, now only $75. Or get a month's supply, normally $247, now only $147, shipped in one business day. Just go to preparewiththefringe.com or call 888-440-7931. That's 888-440-7931. Get this great offer and be prepared while it lasts. Start your evenings with the Fringe FM long before those other shows get started. Exclusively live on the Fringe FM, hear the Quantum Hologram Matrix with the Reverend John Polk, Tuesdays at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. And our newest show, Sci-Spy Radio with Suzanne Ross, Wednesdays at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. Then stay up because we're burning the midnight oil well into the morning hour. The truth is out there, and so are we. Lock it in, the Fringe FM.
Call Joe, pick up the phone, dial 1-800-588-0335, toll free from the United States or Canada.
Well, I want to thank Corinne Boyer for coming on the program. That was pretty cool learning about all that. I'm trying to get into this idea of animism a little bit more and understand the spiritual things behind plants and get into the occult aspect of the metaphysics. You know, until we understand nature, we're all curious about magic and the occult and stuff, but I think the secrets to most of all that is in nature. I really do. Because when you learn things like sacred geometry and hermetics, you start seeing that there's something much bigger going on. So yeah, fascinating guest. And right now, with us right now, it's been a minute, but our madman Eric Markham, our resident scientist, is here with us. Eric, what did you think about the guest? Did you like those topics? I knew it was kind of down your alley a little bit. And I guess Eric's not here. Did we lose Eric? We might have lost Eric. Anyways, I don't know if he put himself on mute, but I can't hear him. Dan Markham, what are you doing to me? So anyways, tomorrow night we're going to have Jeff Harmon back on the program, and he's going to be a co-host. That's when we do our open lines night. So yeah, you're there now, aren't you? We're really going to go over your experiences and stuff, and then once we get that in, then we're going to comment on it. And that's why I opened up that chat room in the Fringe FM that has all about your experiences. So if you're worried about me using your name, which most of you don't use your first name in there anyways, then tell me, because I'll make up a name and we're going to comment on that stuff. And plus it's a call-in show. So every Friday night we're going to do that as well. We got new shows coming to the program. Saturday nights, we're going to have the Midnight Hour where Stephen Campbell is going to be on, or Campbell. I hope I said his name right. That's starting May the 25th. Surviving the System's coming on the program, or on the network as well. And there's still a couple of bigger ones that I can't talk about, but I want to, I wish I could, but I can't. Did you make it back in, Markham, or are you cutting out or something?
No, I hit the stupid touch screen on that friggin' phone.
Yeah, I figured it was something
hitting
like
my
that.
earpiece, thinking it was the earpiece that was muted, and it wasn't.
What about, what did you think about that old tree in North Carolina? Or was it South Carolina or North Carolina? I think it was South Carolina.
I think it was North Carolina. It was
No, it was. Yeah.
It was over in an area where I used to live near there.
Near the Black River?
Yeah, I've been near it. I was on the Neuse River a lot, and there are some ancient cypress trees. We used to go down a branch. My late father-in-law and I were always out fishing every chance we got. And some of those cypress, you'd look over, and these things had to be hundreds of years old. I mean, three burly men wouldn't be able to wrap their arms around the trunks of these things. I just was always amazed by them.
I got something.
Stare off into the cypress woods and miss a fish that I wasn't paying attention.
I got something I want you to think about, because I need a scientist to think about this for me, because it doesn't make sense. They're saying that humans caused the warmth of the moon. So there's a recent study in the Journal of Geophysical Research found that the human presence that we had on the moon, I think it was back in 71 and 72, caused the temperature of the moon to increase. So I've been really watching this thing about the moon. They're saying that it's having earthquakes. Now they're saying that it's warmer. And this data from NASA, quote NASA, says from the 1970s moon landings they released in a Journal of Geophysical Research back in April, reveals that the astronauts probably warmed up the moon's surface temperature by as much as 6 degrees just by walking around and poking into the surface of it. And that study says that the act of driving those rovers around and walking on the moon turned up some darker moon dust called regolith. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
And they're saying that since darker materials absorb more light, the exposure of this darker dust most likely prompted the moon's surface to heat up. So they're saying we caused the moon to heat up because we were there back in 71 and 72. So first off, did we really go to the moon? And secondly, do you think if we did, is there some legitimacy to that?
No, that sounds like politicized bullcrap trying to push an agenda. When you look at the entire surface of the moon and look at that little bitty place that we explored, I just said no. I don't know. That's one of the bad things about a society like that, or that particular group can come out and say something, and because they were legitimate for so many years, people will accept what they say.
How can they know that stuff, though? That's just like an educated guess, it sounds like to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, it could be, I would put that down as a hypothesis that would require much more study. I mean, they've shown that, by however they do it, radio telemetry, they can tell the different temperatures of the different planets. And the base temperature of the entire solar system has gone up in the last, I think it's 50 years, since they started tracking it. The actual temperature of the solar system has gone up. It's just probably part of the sun cycle.
Well, there's a lot of
6% warmer. It's because everything's warmer.
A few days ago they were talking about how the moon was having earthquakes, and that they think that the moon is actually kind of like the Earth, and it's got the plate tectonics and stuff's moving around. if that thing rattled like a bell when they landed on it, it just doesn't make sense to me. I think it could be just more propaganda. I know something's going on up there with this whole Space Force thing, and I'm trying to find somebody to talk to about it, but I'm not buying half the stuff they're saying, except for maybe the Typhon asteroid that's supposed to be here in like 10 years or whatever. But I think that they're pushing out more media stuff to give more reasons in the media, because if you really look at the pyramid structure of the media and who's controlling it, then you know, right? And I think they're pushing out more stuff so that they can have more excuses to go up there and have their little space war, so they can decide who's going to own what up there and do their space race thing. What do you think?
Oh, I think the cute thing is going to be when the Chinese go there and start bringing back Apollo artifacts. and selling them on eBay or something. It's like, here's a piece of the lunar lander. I feel like we had a supremacy and we gave it up. By all, it has always been a very short, space exploration has been very short-sighted. I mean, if we were serious about it and had the right people in charge, all those gigantic fuel tanks that we used to drop when the space shuttle was launched, one-time use, those were perfect to be made into habitats. And they could have been pulled into orbit, set up there. You could have had a International Space Station, a lot sturdier and a lot better than what we've got. Just using those, if you remember the space shuttle launches, there was that huge red tank that it was strapped to. You had the two small tanks, rockets on the side, but there was this huge reddish orange tank in the middle that everything was strapped to. Those could have been boosted on into our orbit and reused, repurposed, instead of, forgot how many millions each one of those cost, dropped into the ocean or, just thrown away as junk.
Yeah. We're going to have to get David Adair back on here, because I know.
Oh, yes.
I know he's got something to say about all this, right? He definitely, his story is so wild, though, isn't it? Isn't it? He's got one of the wildest stories when it comes to alien UFO tech and all this stuff, but he's so, I believe him, though, man. Like, for some reason, I believe him.
The man's paid he's mentioned he's paid quite a personal price for his story. I mean, you can validate a great deal of his story. I mean, he graduated high school and they literally pressed him into the Navy. I mean, it was like, you're coming with us, you're going to be an officer, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. And you can see that he had a naval career and what he did. So if he's delusional, that's the problem with a genius like David Adair. If he is delusional, he is of a genius enough level to make his delusion plausible. And I'm not saying he is. I'm just saying that, that's the hard part. But so much of what he says rings true. And he's so together and cogent in other ways, it's just hard to believe that, okay, here's truth, here's a section of BS, we're back to truth. It doesn't, his narrative makes more sense as truth than it does as wild fancy, to me.
Are you jealous? Would you like to have been, I think if I was a scientist, I would be jealous of David. I'd like to be so smart that they'd come after me like that.
Yes.
Yeah. See, I love your honesty. Thank you for that.
I mean, I'm mediocre. I've got a high IQ, but I don't have a lot of ambition, so I don't do much with it. And see somebody like David Adair, it's like, God, if I just had a little bit better mix of genes, that would be me.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do this. Hold on a second. Susan says, Joe, it's mainly to accept your feelings, even more so talk about them. Oh, no. I try not to talk about my feelings. I mean, I try to be a manly man. We don't talk about our feelings, right? Because it's none of your business, right? That's the manly man thing. You don't want to do that as a man too much, because I've done that on the air a couple of times, and I've actually broke down and started sniveling, and there's nothing worse than listening to a husky boy weep on the air, trust me. So I've put a stop to all that stuff. Now, not to say I won't tell you how I feel every now and then when I'm telling a story, but I don't want to get too deep in there. It just makes me feel funny, you know. I think she was referring to when I was talking about how I felt about when everybody was cutting down those trees at the deer woods and stuff. I mean, they just slaughtered the place, man, you know. And,
I get physically ill when I drive by a place like, you know, that Winston-Salem is going through this ungodly, unnecessary amount of growth. I mean, there's nothing here, all right, to support all this. And I went by this area, and they just like bulldoze all of this ancient, you know, well, it wasn't ancient, I imagine, but I imagine the trees were in the, you know, 100, 200-year-old category. And this whole ecosystem's been wiped out. It's dirt, you know, to make more, you know, yuppie hutches that we don't really need. And just, it's sickening. It actually makes, I always think when I drive by a place like that where they just slaughtered a forest, I think of how J.R.R. Tolkien created the orcs.
The trees?
You know, the maggot folk. Well, no, the orcs were, so, you know, the industrial, basically, when he saw what was happening to the countryside around him when the developers were destroying what made the place special and made people want to be there, you know, he looked on the people doing that as like the maggot folk. You know, these things, they were just, that was the most intense insult he could think of, was to create the race of orcs to be these maggots that destroyed everything, you know, that was green and beautiful.
Yeah, they're called deer
And every time I
hunters.
drive by a site like that, I think of, you know, that quote from where I think it was Gandalf talking about the maggot folk of Mordor. I hear that in my head when I drive by a site like that.
I mean, look, don't get me wrong. I'm glad my dad taught me how to hunt and fish and do all that stuff properly in case I need to. But it's like, for doing it for sport, it just destroys nature in a way. And most of the time when people kill deer out here, they get all this meat from the deer and they don't eat it all. And I'm not saying everybody does that, but from my experience, they end up giving it away because they can't eat it all. And I've seen in some cases where some of it just sits in the freezer and never gets used, and they end up having to throw it out. Now, what's the purpose of that? Well, and they always say, well, you know, the deer, man, they're going to die on their own anyways from disease or predators or something. Well, you know, and let them do that. Why do you have to be a murderer to justify that?
Yeah.
You know?
That's how it's supposed to be. I mean, we had a problem up in the mountains of North Carolina. All of their predators were basically made extinct. You know, any wolves and, you know, coyotes, stuff like that were pretty much eliminated. So you did have overpopulation, and they were road hazards. You know, these things would get down in a hollow, and they'd panic. And, you know, there was a lot of deer that got hit between where I lived and where I worked. It was paved with deer at certain times of the year. And, you know, the whole thing was, well, we need to hunt. We need to hunt them. We need to hunt them. It's in there. Well, no, we needed to not interfere with the natural order of things, destroy all of their predators. You know, I just think that there's a passage in the Bible where it's always used as justification for effing over the nature, you know, how God supposedly gave man dominion over the birds and the beasts.
Uh-huh.
Well, the actual translation, it's not about being a dominant force. It's about being a warden, a protector.
taking care of something.
We were supposed to be stewards of the land, stewards of the, of nature, not this destructive viral garbage that we've become.
Well, I will say this, and Corinne was right. If I could ever, people say, I would never curse anybody. Well, let's look at this situation.
In a heartbeat.
Let's look at this situation. Somebody shot Leo with a .22. That's why he can't go outside anymore. I had to take him to the vet. That cat is like my second son. Now, I can't go over there and beat the brakes off of this guy, which is what I want to do to this day. Knock on his door, give him the old get shorty treatment, and just, smash his head in. Now, what's that going to happen? I'm going to go to jail. It's going to be stupid. He may end up whooping me. You don't know, right? So there's a lot of bad scenarios.
You know who did it now.
Yeah, but I know who did it. So there's a lot of bad scenarios that can come out of that. However, what if I was to do a little nature magic and make sure that never happened again, right? And I'm not saying that I would take the guy out, because I've heard other people say I'd kill him, but not like that. But just make sure that it was something enough to where they knew maybe we shouldn't do this anymore. Like, for example, the next time you kill an animal or hurt an animal uselessly for any reason like that, this happens. And it will always happen. Maybe they'll stop. I don't know. I want to give you guys what do you think, though? Yeah, I want to know what you think.
You are a much better man than me, because if somebody shot BB with a .22 and I knew who they were, they would never eat solid food. Oh, I wouldn't kill them, no, but I'd make sure that the rest of their life was a living hell. And with my knowledge of medicine and biology, I could do it. I could do it.
You better stop it there.
I would.
You better stop it there. Because I don't want you to end up in jail for bad intent. But what we're going to do is, you know what I mean? Because I know how you are. You might start talking about it on the show one day, then something happens and go, hey, wait a minute. Wasn't Eric on Lighting the Void on the Fringe FM talking about exactly that? And all of a sudden this guy, you see what I mean? So,
no, BB stayed. No, it's not going to happen, because BB stays in the house. He doesn't do well outside, because he's been a house cat most of his life.
Kind of like,
and just when he does go outside, he's like, or gets out, he freaks out and comes right back in. So it's not like I'm keeping him prisoner, but he's probably the most spoiled, well-guarded cat in America.
Yeah, for sure. But look, we got one real quick one. This is like, grab a drink, stay with us. We'll be right back. We're going to kind of tease you in tomorrow night. I got a pretty weird experience I want to tell you about from a listener that has to do a little bit with what we were talking tonight. And this is kind of foreshadowing for what we're going to be doing tomorrow night. I'm Joe Roop. This is Lighting the Void. We're live on the Fringe FM. Don't forget, after the broadcast, the Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable is going to be on. 5 nights a week, we're here for you. Well, 7 nights a week. We've got new shows on the weekends, plus you got Jeremy Scott, Into the Paranormal, Michael Deacon, End of Days. Man, I can go on and on. All you got to do is just turn it to the Fringe FM and leave it on. It's the best thing you can do for yourself. We'll be right back.
Is out there.
There's something out here.
And so are we. KTOK Digital Broadcasting, The Fringe FM.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Hello, this is Vance Nesbitt.
Take the time to expand your mind by listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop right here on The Fringe FM.
Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM.
Hey, is that a new music app?
Yeah, check it out. Surfer Music Discovery. It links to thousands of online stations, but the twist is you see the song names and artists that are now playing live.
That's different. No guessing. Looks like a waterfall of music.
So many formats. Rock, oldies, country, R&B, jazz, and a whole lot more.
How's that spelled?
Surfer. S-U-R-F-R.
Is it expensive?
It's free. No need to sign up or sign in.
Get the Surfer Music app free from Google Play or the App Store.
Lighting the Void is proud to announce Mind and Magic's Protection and Defense Course for protection from magical and psychic attacks. This is not a joke. Magic practitioners are on the rise, and with that comes attacks from baneful or black magicians that try to harm or hurt others for their own selfish reasons. If you are not a believer in psychic attacks, then this isn't for you. If you are, and you want the power to defend yourself and your family and home, then I highly suggest you grab Freighter Xavier's Protection and Defense Course. In this course, you will learn how to tell if you are under attack from a natural source or if an individual is attacking you. The 4 forms of curses and attacks. How to remove self-imposed curses. The correct way to cleanse your home from negativity or malevolent entities. How to make your own holy water. What you should always keep near or under your bed. Herbs that banish negativity and promote purity. The most powerful banishing rituals on the planet. And for those that seem to want to harm you the most, how to put your enemies in a hell pit of their own making. You can also learn protection against shadow people and other entities. Or are you just in a bad planetary alignment? Even how to get rid of an enemy using a tic-tac box. It does not matter what your faith or belief is, this will work. Click the banner on the website at lightingthevoid.com or go to lightingthevoid.com/Xavier.
Okay, here we go. AncientLifeOil.com. AncientLifeOil.com. Now this is for CBD. AncientLifeOil.com. Again, for CBD. Where do I get CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. It's pretty good stuff. Organic, non-GMO. We are the Ferrari of CBDs. AncientLifeOil.com. You know, they say when you mention a person's name 3 times when you first meet, that you're going to remember. So I'd say to you, nice to meet you, AncientLifeOil.com. It's AncientLifeOil.com, right? Nice to know that you help people. AncientLifeOil.com. Think about this. Occasional stress, occasional anxiety, occasional inflammation, occasional stiffness, and intruders that get you down. AncientLifeOil.com. Okay, so I'm going to give you a fact for the day. So Ancient Life Oil does not help you with business deals. Hold on a second. If you feel better, it could help you make a better decision. Okay, I'm wrong. Just remember to go to AncientLifeOil.com.
Want to know what's on The Fringe FM? Check out our schedule at thefringe.fm.
I'm not tired!
All right, welcome back to Lighting the Void. Let's get into this. Right now, we're going to do a little bit of Share Your Experience, a teaser to Friday night. Might as well. And this is from Micro Grower in the Fringe FM chat. So, for 2 nights, my 2-year-old, who has a bed in my wife and I's room, would wake up terrified, saying he's on the ceiling. We both thought it was just a nightmare. A few nights later, I was laying in bed trying to fall asleep, and suddenly I had this mental image of a shadowy figure. I said to it in my mind that I see you. What are you doing here? And you're not welcome here. So I tried to concentrate on it as long as I could, but fell asleep. And 2 nights later, my son was sleeping in our bed, and he woke up again saying he's on the ceiling. I was fast asleep, but my wife woke up. My wife is very sensitive to these things, and she could feel the presence in the room, and she said it was an incredibly threatening one. And we thought it wanted to hurt us. At the same time, she felt the presence of her dead grandfather, which isn't unusual for her. In many tough situations, she says she hears his voice, smells his cologne or cigar. He said to her that night that it would be okay if he was there. But my wife asked him to stay with my son while she went to get the sage. She burned it in the room, and the shadow left. Now why I didn't wake up, I do not know. But my wife and I have talked about this a lot since. She had the feeling for quite a while that something was watching her through our bedroom window at night whenever she would go upstairs to get things ready for bed, and it scared her. Our local herbalist made us a concoction to spread around the perimeter of the house, and we haven't had an issue like that since, except for one evening when my wife was making the bed before our son's bedtime and was burning sage. But when she closed the curtains, she had a feeling that something was outside the window. So she opened she opened the window a crack just to see, and in that instant, her nose started to bleed, and it was very intense for a few weeks. You see there? That means that some of this stuff is real. That's a pretty freaky situation. I don't know if it's a shadow. I don't know if it's my grandpa or whatever. But, yeah, the nose bleeding thing definitely would have freaked me right the hell out. We got a text in about the cat because I was talking earlier about how somebody had shot Leo with a .22. He survived. Listen, I know some of you are curious about how he got shot. When he came home, it was like at the top of his hide on the back. It didn't go into him. It just kind of skinned him and opened him up, and there was a little piece of lead in there, and I could tell it was a .22 shell, and I became furious. So earlier, Eric and I was discussing, well, you know, everybody says they would never magically curse anybody, but there are certain situations that maybe you would do that. And I got a text in that says, yeah, what I would do is make an effigy of that sumbitch and wrap it in poison leaves and burlap and let me know when the sumbitch starts breaking out in hives. Yeah. Yeah. See, so sometimes some people would curse folks, you know, right? I mean, like, I don't think when people say, oh, that's a dark magic, I'd never do that. Well, there are certain situations where, if you acted like Eric said, you went over there and just pounded the guy's head in, there's repercussions of that. You end up in jail, then you got a record, and now you're in the system, and you can't survive when you get in the law's pocket, and that's a whole other thing. Or you could just make a little effigy and make sure that don't happen again. There's a moral situation there, I think, a moral dilemma for some people. I don't think I would be too beyond it when it comes to hurting my family, though. What do you think, Eric?
Right. Well, no, I don't. I think that there's dark curses for a reason, and I think there's times that should be used judiciously, and that may be one. That kind of makes me remember a movie years ago. It was called Powder, and this kid had what we would call supernatural abilities. It just seemed like he was a little bit more evolved. And he went out with a group of boys, and they shot a deer. And the guy that shot the deer was bragging about it. And the title character, Powder, grabs the dying deer as it's gasping out its last and grabs the hunter by the hand. And he makes the hunter feel what the deer felt. And I've always loved that. I think that's one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. Because sport hunting, you know, if you're going to use the animal and use it to survive, yeah, hunt. I've got a coworker whose her husband hunts. He uses every bit of the animal, and he eats. You know, they consume or use all of it. He's not one of those people that kills and then throws the meat away, or just hangs a head, carves the antlers off or hangs a head on his wall. He actually likes wild game. In fact, she brought me some wild turkey that he had shot. I'd never had wild turkey before, and it was awesome. I might start hunting turkey myself.
You sound like, I was thinking about The Rock. Do you ever watch wrestling? Come on, I know you used to watch. You've watched it before, hadn't you? You remember The Rock?
Oh,
Make an effigy out of that son of a bitch. Polish it all up, turn it sideways, and stick it up your candy ass. I used to love him doing that, man. But now wrestling sucks. Sorry for all you wrestling fans, but it really does. It kind of sucks.
My stepson was into it for a while, and I'd watch it with him. But to be honest, I don't even remember who the big stars were.
Well, they used to have dark magicians in wrestling. You don't remember Papa Shango when he put the curse on the Ultimate Warrior? I mean, he was the voodoo guy that used to come in there with that staff and rattle, and he put a curse on the Ultimate Warrior, and the Ultimate Warrior, they had to pull him out in a stretcher, and he was throwing up all over the place. That was real wrestling.
Really?
That was awesome back in the day. Yeah.
Well, I remember like Dick the Bruiser and Cowboy Bob Ellis and those. And my dad told me years ago that, when I was a kid, he said, oh, it's all fake. He had gone to a wrestling match in Muncie, Indiana. And just, saw, I think it was Dick the Bruiser and somebody. Anyhow, doesn't matter who the names were. Yeah, I am a year older every year. And, he had seen the match, and I mean, it just gouging and blood and these two hating each other. Well, later that night, Dad, he was sort of a wild child. He took his car over to Gas City. It's not too far from Muncie. And there, sitting at the table drinking and having a good time, were the very two guys who had beat each other bloody in the ring over in Muncie. There wasn't a scratch on them. There was in there, just dressed in normal clothes. There wasn't no black eyes, no bloody noses, no gouge marks or bite marks or any of that crap. It was just two guys sitting across from each other at the bar, BSing and having a beer. So he knew it was fake from that time on.
I think I'm going to do a riddle, and if somebody can figure out this riddle, I might actually give you a t-shirt this month. So I'm giving away t-shirts for two things. Okay. One is if you go to preparewiththefringe.com and you get $100 or more, you're going to get a free Lighting the Void t-shirt. The next thing is if you can solve this riddle, I'll give out one too. All right. And you can't say anything, Eric. You can text it to me.
Oh, damn it.
Actually, you know what? Well, you don't have a new Lighting the Void t-shirt, do you?
You know what? It's funny. I'm actually wearing my Lighting the Void that has the symbol.
Oh, you got the one with the sigil on it? Okay.
Yeah,
that's
I've
the old
got
one.
the original. Yeah, that's the one I'm wearing right now, actually.
All right, here we go. Here's the riddle, and you got to guess what this is. And then tomorrow night you can call in. We're not going to do it tomorrow night. I'm going to give you time to think about it. Okay? So, strictly speaking, we are not beings. However, without one, we are not seen. Angling around from dawn to dusk, only to meet our destiny of wasting away at the end of the day, silently waiting again to play. What am I? I'll say it one more time. Strictly speaking, we are not beings. However, without one, we are not seen. Angling around from dawn till dusk, only to meet our destiny of wasting away at the end of the day, silently waiting again to play. Yeah, that's not an easy one, is it? I might let that one go on for a couple, but it's actually the answer is very, very simple. And I'll give you a hint. You see these every day.
Give it one more time.
One more time. Okay, here we go. Strictly speaking, we are not beings. However, without one, we are not seen. Angling around from dawn till dusk, only to meet our destiny of wasting away at the end of the day, silently waiting again to play. A riddle. Next time I'll drop the line for that, so you know a riddle's coming up. Like, what can we do for a sound drop for that? We could do like Smeagol. Ooh, I love riddles. We'll just start doing that.
Yeah.
So I'll give you till tomorrow night to figure that out. I'll say it a couple of times again tomorrow night too, because Jeff's going to co-host with us tomorrow night, and Eric, you can come on. It's going to be like open line stuff, and we're going to do share your experience as well. And here's another one from Angel. Last night I watched a video of a bunch of magicians and their shows, And every now and then, whoever made the video would throw in scriptures and say that the magician's magic came where the magician's magic came from, or is it of the devil, or is it Satan? Jesus performed magic and miracles. Tesla performed magic with his inventions, but we are miracles. We are magical beings. It's so sad that some think that it's a devilish thing when one can do something out of the ordinary. When I wrote, I would go to the crossroads and confront Lucifer. I realized that was the last of all my fears, and there is nothing else to fear. With love and peace in my heart, have all the sense of all life is magic and magical. That's one way to justify calling in Lucifer. You know, that's just a fear I've got to overcome. So there you go. That was from Angel. Beautiful, Angel. Did you really do that, though? Did you really call in Lucifer at the crossroads in the middle of the night when nobody was around? I don't think I can. I still can't bring myself to do that. Sorry. Not saying it's bad. It's too scary for me right now.
I don't know. I've come to the conclusion. I'm not saying that there would not be an forbidding presence to meet, but I don't think that what we've been told or the narrative is
true. That's exactly what I think too.
No, I don't think it is. I think a lot of ways humans do not like to take responsibility for the things that they do wrong. And I think in the case of Lucifer, it
was Satan.
Well, the devil made me do it. Yeah,
What if the devil did make you do it, though?
I don't think the devil has to. I think we are perfectly capable of being just as evil as anything in the universe can be, and we don't need like a supernatural force to blame it on. It's inherent in our nature. I think there may be that rare person out there who doesn't have that little core of nastiness within them. I think what separates us, say the good from the bad is those that are perceived as good can keep a lid on it for the most part. And those that are perceived as evil don't try to put a lid on it. Somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer, who was, he was a psychopath from an early age. But he wanted to be loved and couldn't be, or, found there was no way. A lot of some of his victims, he had tried to lobotomize, more or less just make like living sex dolls out of them.
Oh, Jesus.
He was a very twisted individual, but the same wiring that makes him that, I
understand where you're going, and we got to get out of here, but I think that might, in that case, I think there might definitely be some evil in the world, so there you go. Look, tomorrow night, it's going to be open lines, open discussion. The call-in number is 1-800-588-0335. I want to thank Pacho and Don and Barbara, especially Pacho this time, for making these 2 past episodes happen. The Lighting the Void team is really kicking it in gear. I really appreciate you guys, Barbara, Blake, Pacho, Don, Eric. Thank you all so much. We got to get out of here. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Don't forget, The Secret Teachings is up next if you're listening live. But this show was produced by the Fringe FM and can't be syndicated without written permission. Main music by Chronox, Guitar Man by Bundy. Other music was by Space Station, Kevin MacLeod, and the Public Domain. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Good night.
program do not necessarily reflect those of the Fringe FM, KTLK Digital Broadcasting, its sponsors, affiliates, or staff. Listener discretion is advised. We told you weeknights on the Fringe FM are now even better. And we mean it.
Do it live!
Where else can you hear the best shows and the best talent? Kick off your evening with our newest host, Alex Exum, live at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 Eastern. Hang out with me, Joe Roop, on Lighting the Void at 9 Pacific, midnight Eastern. Ryan Gable expands your mind on the secret teachings at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern. We're bringing the heat every single night. Fire it up, the Fringe FM.
Yahoy there! This is Gigi from Shift Happens. And holy shit, you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM. Hey, don't you dare turn that stick.